Helena Moretti was bleeding out her third chance at redemption when she heard her sister bargaining for her marriage. The private hospital room still smelled of antiseptic and failure. 5 years as the ghost wife of New York's most feared mafia boss, and she'd finally learned the truth. Her body wasn't broken. It was sabotaged. Outside her door, Vivian's voice dripped poison. 3 strikes, Luca. Even you can't ignore biology forever. In that moment, something inside Helena didn't shatter. It sharpened. If you want to know how a forgotten wife brought an empire to its knees, stay until the end. And drop a comment with your city. Let's see how far this story travels. Helena Moretti lay in the private suite of the hotel. Helena Moretti lay in the private suite of Manhattan's most exclusive hospital, the kind where celebrities delivered babies and politicians died quietly, and stared at the ceiling tiles she'd counted 3 times before. 47. Always 47. Some things never changed. Other things ended before they could begin. The IV drip whispered in the silence. Beyond the reinforced windows, the city sprawled in its perpetual fever of light and noise, indifferent to the small death that had occurred in room 1407. The medical team had been efficient, clinical, kind in that professionally distant way that somehow made it worse. They'd cleaned everything up, disposed of the evidence, given her pamphlets about grief counseling and support groups she would never attend. Mrs. Moretti, we're so sorry for your loss. Mrs. Moretti, these things happen. Mrs. Moretti, you're young. There will be other chances. Except there wouldn't be, not anymore. Helena knew it with the certainty of someone who'd been playing a rigged game for 5 years. This was the 3rd time she'd lain in a hospital bed, feeling her body betray the only purpose it was supposed to serve. The Moretti family didn't need a wife. They needed a womb, a vessel, an heir. And she had failed. Again. The door opened without ceremony. No knock. In Luca's world, privacy was a privilege earned through power, and Helena had none. She didn't turn her head. She already knew who it was by the footsteps. Heavy, measured, purposeful. Luca Moretti didn't walk into rooms. He occupied them. "You're awake," he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't concern. It was an observation delivered in that low, controlled voice that had ordered executions and brokered treaties with equal indifference. Helena kept her eyes on the ceiling tiles. 47. The drugs are wearing off. The doctor said you need rest. The doctor says a lot of things. Silence stretched between them like all the conversations they'd never had. 5 years of marriage, and they'd perfected the art of existing in separate universes within the same house, the same bed, the same life that wasn't really a life at all. Luca moved to the window, putting the width of the room between them. He was tall, dark-haired, built like the violence he trafficked in, elegant in an Italian suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Handsome in the way that dangerous things often were. His face belonged on Roman coins or Renaissance paintings, hard angles, strong jaw, eyes the color of smoke and secrets. Helena had stopped noticing his looks somewhere around the 2nd year of their marriage. Beauty meant nothing when it came wrapped in indifference. "The board is asking questions," Luca said, still facing the window. Of course they were. The board, the family, the enterprise. Luca's world had many names for the same thing, a criminal empire built on blood, money, and tradition. An empire that required certain things to continue. Legacy, succession, an heir. "Let them ask," Helena said quietly. "It's been 5 years, Helena. 5 years, 3 months, and 16 days, but who was counting? I'm aware of how time works, Luca." He turned then, and she finally looked at him. His expression was unreadable. It always was. Luca Moretti had turned emotional opacity into an art form. In 5 years, she'd seen him laugh exactly twice, both times at functions where appearances mattered. She'd seen him angry only once, when a shipment went missing and someone paid for it with their life. She'd never seen him cry, never seen him vulnerable, never seen him as anything other than what he was, a man who'd been raised to rule, not to feel. "The family is losing patience," he said. "Then perhaps the family should have married someone more suitable." Something flickered across his face. Annoyance? Regret? It vanished before she could identify it. "The arrangement was beneficial to both our families," he said, falling back on the language of contracts and deals. Everything with Luca came down to transactions. Their marriage had been one, a merger between the Morettis and the Ashfords, two powerful families looking to consolidate influence and territory. Helena's father had been a high-ranking political operative with connections that made things happen. Luca had been an heir apparent who needed legitimacy and access. The marriage made sense on paper. It had made sense right up until Helena's body started failing at its one essential job. "I'm tired, Luca," she said, and she meant it in ways that had nothing to do with the medical procedure she'd just endured. "Can we do this later?" "Do what?" "Whatever this is. The post-mortem. The performance evaluation." His jaw tightened. "I'm not—" "Yes, you are." Helena finally sat up, ignoring the pull of stitches and the swimming sensation in her head. "You're here because someone told you it would look bad if you didn't show up. You're here because appearances matter to the family. You're here for the same reason you do everything, because it serves a purpose." "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" They stared at each other across the expensive medical equipment and the chasm of everything they'd never said. 5 years of polite distance, 5 years of separate bedrooms except for the carefully scheduled attempts at conception. 5 years of existing in a marriage that was really just a business arrangement that had stopped producing returns. "I should go," Luca said finally. "You need rest." "I need a lot of things. Rest isn't one of them." He paused at the door, his hand on the handle. For a moment, she thought he might say something real, something true, something that acknowledged they were two people trapped in a situation neither of them had wanted, but both had agreed to. Instead, he said, "Your sister is here. She's been waiting to see you." And then he was gone, leaving Helena alone with the IV drip and the ceiling tiles and the knowledge that even now, even in this, Luca couldn't just be present. He had to delegate, pass her off to family, return to the business that mattered more than she ever would. She closed her eyes and tried not to feel anything at all. Vivian Ashford swept into the room like she owned it, which wasn't far from the truth. Helena's older sister had always moved through the world with the confidence of someone who knew her value and expected others to recognize it too. She was beautiful in the sharp, calculated way of women who understood that appearance was power. Blonde, where Helena was brunette, tall where Helena was average, magnetic where Helena had learned to make herself invisible. "Oh, sweetheart," Vivian said, her heels clicking against the linoleum as she approached the bed. "I came as soon as I heard." Helena opened her eyes. "Did you?" "Of course." Vivian settled into the chair Luca had never occupied, crossing her legs with practiced grace. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost a fortune, her hair pulled back in a sleek chignon that emphasized cheekbones that could cut glass. "How are you feeling?" "How do you think?" Vivian's expression arranged itself into sympathy. "I can't imagine what you're going through. 3 times. Helena, that's just devastating." 3 times. Her sister had a talent for making it sound like a failure instead of a tragedy. "The doctors say these things happen," Helena said, echoing the platitudes that meant nothing. "Still," Vivian reached out and squeezed Helena's hand. Her fingers were cool, her grip brief. "You must be wondering if maybe, if maybe this is a sign." Helena looked at her sister, really looked. Vivian was 34, 2 years older, and had spent her entire life being the golden child. The successful one. The one who did everything right while Helena fumbled through existence like an afterthought. "A sign of what?" Helena asked. "That perhaps you and Luca aren't compatible, biologically speaking." There it was. The knife wrapped in concern. "Some couples just aren't meant to have children together," Vivian continued, her voice soft, reasonable. "It's nobody's fault. It's just biology." "Right, biology. I'm only saying that maybe it's time to consider other options, for everyone's sake." Vivian's gaze was steady, earnest. "The family needs an heir, Helena. Luca needs an heir. And you need to stop putting yourself through this." Helena pulled her hand back. "What are you really saying, Vivian?" "I'm saying that this marriage was always about alliance, not love. You know that. We all know that." Vivian leaned forward, her expression shifting into something that might have been genuine concern if Helena didn't know her better. "But alliances can be restructured. Agreements can be renegotiated. You could be free, Helena. Free to find someone who actually wants you, not just what you're supposed to provide." The words landed like stones in still water, spreading ripples of implication. "And Luca?" Helena asked quietly. Vivian sat back, smoothing her skirt. "Luca would do what he's always done. What's best for the family." "You mean marry someone else?" "I mean marry someone who can give him what he needs." "Someone like you," Helena thought, but didn't say. Because suddenly, with perfect clarity, she understood what this visit was really about. It wasn't concern. It wasn't sisterly love. It was positioning. Vivian had always wanted what Helena had, even when what Helena had was barely anything at all. In childhood, it had been their father's attention. In adolescence, it had been the boys who noticed Helena's quiet beauty instead of Vivian's obvious glamour. And now, it was Luca. Not because Vivian loved him, but because he represented power, and Vivian had always craved power like other people craved air. "I'm tired," Helena said, reaching for the call button. "Of course, you need rest." Vivian stood, gathering her purse. "I'll let you sleep. But think about what I said, Helena. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is recognize when something isn't working and let it go." She left in a cloud of expensive perfume, and Helena lay in the silence that followed, feeling something shift inside her chest. Not breaking, not shattering, hardening. Good. It was after midnight when Helena heard them. The morphine had worn off enough that she couldn't sleep, but not enough that she could escape the dull ache in her abdomen or the sharper pain in her chest that had nothing to do with medical procedures. She'd been lying in the dark, listening to the hospital's nocturnal symphony, distant monitors beeping, footsteps in far corridors, the occasional murmur of nursing staff. Then she heard Luca's voice in the hallway outside her room, and Vivian's answering. Helena went still. The door was heavy, designed for privacy, but voices carried in the late-night quiet. She shouldn't listen. She should close her eyes, let the exhaustion take her, mind her own business in the dissolution of her own life. But something made her slide carefully out of bed, ignoring the pull of stitches and the dizziness that came with vertical movement. She moved to the door on silent feet, pressing close enough to hear. "Not sustainable," Vivian was saying. "You have to see that." "What I see is none of your concern." Luca's voice was cold, controlled. "Isn't it? Our families are connected, Luca. What affects you affects us. And this situation with Helena, my wife. Your wife in name only." Vivian's voice dropped lower, intimate. "Come on, Luca. How long are you going to keep pretending this marriage is anything other than a failed political arrangement? 5 years and 3 miscarriages. At some point, you have to face reality." Silence. Helena held her breath. "The reality," Luca said finally, "is that Helena and I are married. That's not changing." "Because of honor? Obligation?" A soft laugh. "You're many things, Luca Moretti, but you're not sentimental. This is business. It's always been business. And the business requires an heir." "I'm aware of what the business requires." "Then you're also aware that Helena can't provide it. 3 chances, Luca. 3 failures. Even you can't ignore biology forever." Helena's hand pressed against the door, steadying herself. 3 strikes. Her sister had actually said it. Had reduced 3 losses, 3 lives that never were, 3 moments of hope that died, to strikes, to failures. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Luca asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm suggesting you have options. The marriage could be annulled. On medical grounds. No fault, no scandal, just an acknowledgement that sometimes these things don't work out." Vivian paused. "And then you'd be free to marry someone who can actually give you what you need. Someone like you." It wasn't a question. Luca had put it together the same way Helena had, the real agenda hiding behind sisterly concern. Vivian didn't deny it. "We've always understood each other, you and I. We see the world the same way. We want the same things. And unlike my sister, I'm not damaged." The word hit like a fist. Damaged. "Helena is not damaged," Luca said, and there was an edge to his voice Helena had never heard directed at anyone on her behalf. "Then what would you call it? 3 miscarriages in 5 years? Luca, be realistic. She's broken, and you can't build a legacy on broken foundations." More silence. Helena waited for Luca to defend her, to shut Vivian down completely, to show some loyalty to the wife he'd married, even if he didn't love her. Instead, he said, "I need time to think," and Helena's world tilted on its axis. "Of course," Vivian said smoothly, victory in her voice. "Take all the time you need, but don't take too long. The families are talking, the board is restless, and opportunities don't wait forever." Footsteps moved away. Helena stumbled back to bed, her mind spinning. She made it under the covers just as the door opened and a nurse came in for vitals check. Professional and efficient and oblivious to the fact that Helena's entire existence had just realigned itself around a new truth. Her sister was trying to steal her husband, and Luca was considering it. Yet, the next 3 days passed in a fog. Helena was released from the hospital with medications and instructions and the kind of pitying looks that made her want to scream. Luca sent a car. Of course he did, always delegating, always maintaining distance, and she was driven back to the Moretti estate in Westchester, where she'd lived as a ghost for 5 years. The house was enormous, old money elegant, full of rooms she never entered and staff who knew not to acknowledge her. She'd been invisible here from the beginning, the wife who didn't matter, the woman who'd failed at her one job, the placeholder warming a seat that should have gone to someone more worthy. Helena went to her bedroom, not the master suite she'd shared with Luca in the early days, but the guest room she'd claimed after the second miscarriage, when sharing a bed felt like a cruelty neither of them needed. She closed the door, locked it, and stood in the middle of expensive emptiness, trying to figure out what came next. Divorce? Annulment? Would Luca really set her aside for Vivian? The thought should have hurt more than it did. Maybe she'd just run out of ways to feel pain. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You deserve to know the truth." Helena stared at the message. Spam? Wrong number? She was about to delete it when another message arrived. "Check your email. The password is your mother's maiden name." Her mother had died when Helena was 12. Vivian was the only other person who would know Evelyn Grant's maiden name. But this didn't feel like Vivian's style. Too cryptic, too careful. Against her better judgment, Helena opened her laptop and checked her email. There was a new message from an address she didn't recognize, a series of numbers and letters that meant nothing. She opened it. Inside was a single PDF attachment, medical records, her medical records. But not from the current hospital. These were older, from years ago, from the fertility clinic she'd visited when the pregnancies kept failing. Helena's hands shook as she read. The diagnosis was there, clinical and clear. Hereditary thrombophilia, a blood clotting disorder that could cause recurrent miscarriages if left untreated. Treatable. Manageable. Not a death sentence for pregnancy, just something that needed monitoring, medication, care. She kept reading, her heart pounding. The record showed she'd been diagnosed 4 years ago. 4 years. Before the second miscarriage. Before the third. Someone had known. Some doctor had identified the problem and prescribed treatment. And Helena stopped breathing. The treatment recommendations had been removed from her file. Not lost. Not misplaced. Deliberately deleted. And in their place was a note from her former physician, Dr. Marcus Reeves, stating that the patient had been informed of the diagnosis and declined treatment. Except Helena had never been informed, had never declined anything, had never even known there was something wrong that could be fixed. Someone had buried her diagnosis. Someone had let her keep losing pregnancies that could have been saved. Someone had sabotaged her. Her phone buzzed again. Dr. Reeves received $500,000 4 years ago. The payment came from an offshore account. I can help you trace it, but you need to decide. Do you want to know who did this to you? Helena's hands were shaking so hard she could barely type her response. Yes. The answer came immediately. Meet me tomorrow, 6 a.m. The address below. Come alone. Trust no one. An address in Queens followed. Some diner Helena had never heard of. She should have been scared. Should have been suspicious. Should have told someone. Luca, security, anyone. But Helena had spent 5 years being afraid, being compliant, being the good wife who never questioned, never demanded, never fought. And look where that had gotten her. She had been betrayed, sabotaged. Someone had deliberately destroyed her chances at motherhood, at the one thing that might have made her matter in this world she'd been sold into. And she was going to find out who, even if it killed her. Helena barely slept. She lay in the dark, her mind spinning through possibilities. Who would benefit from her failure? Who wanted her gone badly enough to pay $500,000 to ensure she kept losing pregnancies? Vivian's face kept appearing in her thoughts, but she pushed it away. Her sister was ambitious, manipulative, cruel. But this level of calculation seemed beyond even Vivian, didn't it? At 5:30, Helena dressed in jeans and a sweater, clothes she barely wore in a life that usually required designer labels and carefully curated appearances. She pulled her hair into a ponytail, grabbed her phone and keys, and slipped out of her room. The house was silent. Staff didn't arrive until 7. Luca was in the city. He kept an apartment there, somewhere he stayed most nights. They rarely occupied the same space anymore. She made it to the garage, selected the least conspicuous car, a black Audi, and pulled out onto the empty streets of Westchester. The drive to Queens took 40 minutes in the pre-dawn darkness, the city slowly waking around her. The diner was exactly what she'd expected. Old, worn, the kind of place that served burned coffee and eggs to night shift workers and insomniacs. Helena parked and walked inside, scanning the sparse crowd. In the back booth sat a woman, 50s, sharp-eyed, dressed in a blazer that had seen better days. She looked up as Helena approached and nodded to the empty seat across from her. "Mrs. Moretti," the woman said, "thank you for coming." "Who are you?" Helena slid into the booth. "Someone who knows what it's like to be collateral damage in rich people's games." The woman pushed a coffee cup toward Helena. "My name is Angela Torres. I'm a forensic accountant. I used to work for your father." Helena went still. "My father?" "Until I found some irregularities in his accounts and he had me fired." Angela's smile was bitter. "Men like Richard Ashford don't like people who ask questions, but I kept copies of everything, including some very interesting transactions that I think you need to see." She pulled out a tablet and brought up a series of spreadsheets. Helena stared at the numbers, trying to make sense of them. "Your father received 2 payments in the last 4 years, Angela explained, pointing. One for $200,000. One for $300,000. Both from the same offshore account that paid Dr. Reeves to bury your diagnosis." Helena's throat closed. "My father knew?" "More than knew. He was paid to ensure you never got pregnant, or rather, that you never successfully carried to term." "But why? Why would he—" Helena couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't reconcile the man who'd raised her with this level of betrayal. "Because your marriage was supposed to fail," Angela said quietly. "Someone wanted it to fail. Someone needed you to be removed from the equation so they could step in." "Vivian," Helena whispered. Angela nodded. "Your sister has been planning this for years. The payments to your father, the bribe to Dr. Reeves, the medical sabotage, all of it leads back to her. She's been positioning herself as your replacement since before your second miscarriage." Helena felt dizzy, sick. "She's my sister. She's ambitious, and in families like yours, ambition doesn't recognize blood." Angela pulled out a folder thick with documents. "This is everything I have. Bank records, email trails, phone logs. Your sister has been in regular contact with several members of the Moretti board, specifically the ones who've been questioning Luca's leadership. She's been promising them an heir, stability, a wife who can deliver what you couldn't." "Because she made sure I couldn't," Helena said, her voice hollow. "Exactly." Helena stared at the folder, at the evidence of a conspiracy so calculated it made her stomach turn. Her own father, her own sister. They'd sabotaged her, stolen from her, let her believe she was broken when all along they'd been the ones breaking her. "Why are you helping me?" Helena asked. Angela's expression hardened. "Because men like your father ruined my career for doing my job. Because women like your sister think they can manipulate people without consequences. And because someone needs to stop them." "What do you want in return?" "Justice. Or the closest thing to it." Angela leaned forward. "I want Richard Ashford exposed. I want Vivian's schemes brought to light. And I want to watch their world burn." Helena looked at this stranger, this woman who had her own vendetta, her own reasons for revenge. She should have been cautious, should have questioned motives, should have walked away. Instead, she picked up the folder. "Tell me everything," Helena said, and Angela smiled. By the time Helena returned to Westchester, the sun was up, and her entire understanding of her life had been rewritten. She knew now. Knew who had betrayed her, knew why, knew how deep the conspiracy went. Her father had been paid $600,000 total over 4 years, blood money for selling out his daughter. Dr. Reeves had received $500,000 to bury a diagnosis and let a patient keep losing babies. And Vivian had orchestrated it all, funded through accounts connected to the Ravello family. The Ravellos. One of the most powerful crime families on the East Coast, rivals to the Morettis for decades. They'd been trying to undermine Luca for years, looking for weakness, for leverage, for any crack in the foundation. And Vivian had offered them one. A failed marriage. A wife who couldn't produce an heir. An alliance that had outlived its usefulness. Once Helena was removed, Vivian would step in, marry Luca, produce the required heir, and the Ravellos would have their inside influence on the Moretti empire. It was brilliant in its cruelty. Vivian would get power and status. The Ravellos would get access, and Helena would be discarded, blamed for her own failure, never knowing she'd been sabotaged from the start. But now she knew. Helena parked the Audi and sat in the garage, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She should take this to Luca, show him the evidence, expose Vivian and the Ravellos and her father, let the chips fall. Except Luca had said he needed time to think. Had listened to Vivian's proposal and hadn't immediately shut it down. Had spent 5 years treating Helena like a burden he'd been saddled with instead of a partner. Why should she trust him with this? Why should she trust anyone? The answer came quietly, from some part of her that had survived 5 years of invisibility. She shouldn't. This was her fight, her truth, her chance to stop being the victim and become something else. Helena grabbed the folder and went inside. She had work to do. For 3 days, Helena became a different person. She smiled at the staff, took meals in her room, acted like the broken wife recovering from another loss. And in the privacy of her locked bedroom, she built her case. Angela had given her the foundation, but Helena needed more. She needed indisputable proof. She needed leverage. She needed a strategy that would expose her enemies without giving them time to cover their tracks. She started with Dr. Reeves. The man had left his practice in Manhattan, and moved to Connecticut, but he was easy to find. Helena hired a private investigator, one of the legitimate ones, not connected to Luca or the families, and within 2 days she had surveillance photos of Dr. Reeves living in a house worth 3 times what his salary should have afforded, playing golf at expensive clubs, driving a Tesla. The PI also found evidence of offshore accounts, wire transfers, communication with shell companies tied to the Ravello family. Next, Helena went after her father. Richard Ashford had always been careful, but Angela had shown Helena where to look. There were payments disguised as consulting fees, investment returns that didn't match any actual investments, money moving through channels designed to obscure its origin. Helena traced it all, documented it, built a timeline that showed exactly when each payment had occurred in relation to each miscarriage. The pattern was damning. And then there was Vivian. Her sister was harder to crack. She'd been more careful, used more layers. But Helena had something Vivian didn't expect, motivation born from betrayal. She went through old emails, recovered deleted messages, tracked phone records. What she found made her blood run cold. Vivian had been planning this since before the first miscarriage. There were messages to the Ravellos dating back 6 years, before Helena and Luca had even married. Discussions of opportunities and timeline, and ensuring the alliance fails organically. Vivian hadn't just sabotaged Helena's pregnancies, she'd sabotaged the entire marriage from the start. By the end of the 3rd day, Helena had everything she needed. Bank records, medical files, email trails, phone logs, witness statements from Angela and others. A complete picture of conspiracy and betrayal. Now she just needed to decide what to do with it. On the 4th night, Luca came home. Helena was in the library when she heard the front door, the sound of his footsteps in the foyer. She'd been waiting, knowing eventually he'd have to face her, have to have the conversation they'd been avoiding. He appeared in the doorway, still in his suit, looking tired in a way that made him seem almost human. "Helena," he said. "Luca." He moved into the room, poured himself a scotch from the bar cart. "How are you feeling?" "Better." It wasn't a lie. She felt clearer than she had in years, focused, sharp. Good. He took a drink, his back to her. We need to talk. I know. He turned and she saw something in his expression that might have been regret. I've been thinking about what's best for both of us, for the families. And I think perhaps your sister is right. This marriage isn't working. It hasn't been for a long time. Maybe it never did. Helena had known this was coming, had prepared for it, but hearing the words still felt like a blade between her ribs. So you want a divorce, she said calmly. An annulment, on medical grounds. It would be cleaner. Luca set down his glass. You'd be taken care of. Financially, I mean. You'd have security, resources. You could start over. With who? Vivian? His jaw tightened. This isn't about her. Isn't it? Helena stood, crossing to where he stood. Come on, Luca. We've never lied to each other. Don't start now. Fine. He met her gaze. Yes, Vivian has proposed an alternative arrangement, one that would satisfy the family's requirements. The requirement for an heir? Yes. And you think she can give you that? I think she's not... He stopped himself. Broken? Helena supplied. Damaged? Failed? I wasn't going to say that. But you were thinking it. She laughed, bitter. It's fine, Luca. I've been thinking it too. For 5 years I've believed I was defective, that my body was broken, that I was the problem. Helena, but I'm not. She pulled out her phone, brought up the medical records Angela had given her. I have hereditary thrombophilia, a blood clotting disorder. It's treatable, manageable. With proper care, I could have perfectly healthy pregnancies. Lucas stared at the screen. I don't understand. If you knew, I didn't know. Because someone made sure I didn't. Helena pulled up the next document, the payment records to Dr. Reeves. Someone paid my doctor $500,000 to hide my diagnosis and let me keep losing pregnancies. She watched the realization dawn on his face. The shock. The anger. Who? He asked, his voice deadly quiet. Helena pulled up the final document, the wire transfer showing the payment's origin, the account tied to both the Ravello family and Vivian Ashford. Your future wife, Helena said. My sister. The silence that followed was absolute. Luca's expression went from shock to fury to something colder, harder. The face of a man who'd been played, who'd been manipulated, who'd been made a fool. Tell me everything, he said. And Helena did. She showed him all of it, the conspiracy, the payments, the timeline, her father's involvement, the Ravello connection. Vivian's years-long plan to destroy their marriage and replace Helena. She watched Luca's face as he processed it all, saw the moment he understood the full scope of the betrayal. This wasn't just about her, this was an attack on him, on his authority, on his family's power. When she finished, he poured another scotch, drank it in one swallow. She made me doubt you, he said quietly, made me think the failure was yours, that you were... He couldn't finish. Weak, Helena supplied. Inadequate. Disposable. Yes. He looked at her. Really looked at her. Maybe for the first time in 5 years. I'm sorry, Helena, for believing it, for not protecting you, for being so blind. It was the first time he'd ever apologized to her. What are you going to do? She asked. Luca's expression went cold. What I should have done the moment your sister started playing games with my family. Which is? He met her gaze, and Helena saw the ruthless mafia boss who'd built an empire on fear and power. Destroy her, Luca said. Completely. And for the first time in their marriage, they were on the same side. Helena stood at the window of Luca's study, watching dawn break over the Westchester estate. They'd been up all night, going through every document, every transaction, every piece of evidence she'd compiled. The room smelled of coffee and old leather, and somewhere in the past 8 hours, the distance that had defined their marriage for 5 years had collapsed into something else entirely. Partnership. Strategy. A shared enemy. Luca sat at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian to someone Helena didn't know. His tie was loosened, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, the most undone she'd ever seen him. He'd made a dozen calls since midnight, each one brief and cryptic, mobilizing resources she could only guess at. When he finally hung up, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "My people have confirmed everything," he said. "The offshore accounts, the Ravello connection, all of it. Angela Torres was telling the truth." "You doubted her?" "I doubt everyone until I have proof." He stood, moved to the sideboard, poured fresh coffee. "It's how I've stayed alive this long." Helena accepted the cup he offered. Their fingers brushed, and neither of them pulled away as quickly as they might have before. Small shift. Significant. "So what now?" she asked. "Now we decide how we want to handle this." Luca leaned against the desk, studying her. "There are several options. We could go to the other families, expose Vivian and the Ravellos publicly. Let the council deal with them. But that shows weakness. It reveals that my own marriage was infiltrated, that I was blind to a conspiracy happening under my own roof. In our world, perception is everything. If I look vulnerable, others will move against me." Helena sipped her coffee, thinking. "Option 2? We handle it quietly. I have Vivian and your father dealt with. Disappear them. Send a message to the Ravellos that they crossed a line." "Dealt with," Helena repeated. "You mean killed?" Luca's silence was answer enough. She should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual discussion of murder. But Helena had spent 5 years in this world, married to a man whose business was built on violence. She'd known what he was from the beginning, had just never expected to be part of it. "And option 3? She asked, her voice steady. Something flickered in Luca's expression. Surprise? Respect? "You tell me. This is your revenge, Helena. Your sister, your father. What do you want?" Helena set down her coffee and crossed to where he stood. For 5 years, she'd made herself small, invisible, powerless. For 5 years, she'd accepted whatever scraps of existence this marriage offered. For 5 years, she'd believed the lie that she was broken. But she wasn't broken. She was betrayed. And there was a difference. "I want them exposed," she said. "I want everyone to know what they did. I want Vivian to lose everything she tried to steal. I want my father to face consequences. And I want the Ravellos to understand that they made a mistake." "That's not quiet." "I don't want quiet. I want justice." Luca studied her for a long moment, and Helena held his gaze, refusing to look away. Finally, he nodded. "Then we do it your way," he said. "But we do it smart. We need leverage, timing, and an audience that matters." "The meeting with the Ravellos," Helena said, pieces clicking into place. "Vivian mentioned it in the hospital. She's been negotiating with them. There's a sit-down scheduled for next week. The Ravellos requested it, officially to discuss territory disputes, but I suspect it's really about your sister's proposal." Luca's jaw tightened. "They think they're coming to negotiate my marriage." "So we let them think that," Helena said, her mind racing. "We let Vivian believe she's won. We bring everyone together, the Ravellos, the board members she's been talking to, maybe even my father, and then we show them exactly what kind of person she is." "A public execution without the body?" Luca said slowly. "Destroy her reputation, her credibility, her relationships. Leave her alive but completely isolated. Is that worse than killing her? In our world, much worse." Helena felt something dark and satisfied settle in her chest. "Good." Luca pushed away from the desk, began pacing. She recognized it now. The way he moved when he was strategizing, planning, seeing 3 moves ahead. "We'll need more than just evidence," he said. "We need testimony. Someone from the inside who can confirm the conspiracy." "Dr. Reeves." "He's the weak link. Doctors are civilians. They don't have the stomach for real consequences." Luca pulled out his phone, typed something. "I'll have him brought in, quietly. He'll talk." "And my father?" Luca's expression hardened. "Richard is a different problem. He's protected by his political connections, and he's smart enough to have covering stories for the payments. We expose him the same time we expose Vivian, let them destroy each other, trying to deflect blame." Helena nodded, then asked the question that had been circling her mind since Luca had agreed to help her. "Why are you doing this? You were ready to end our marriage 12 hours ago. You were considering Vivian's proposal. Now suddenly you're helping me destroy her. Why?" Luca stopped pacing. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he crossed to where she stood, close enough that she had to look up to meet his eyes. "Because she played me," he said quietly. "Made me doubt you, doubt my own judgment. She manipulated my family, corrupted my board, conspired with my enemies. And she made me cruel to you when you deserved better. Since when do you care about what I deserve?" "Since I realized I've been an idiot for 5 years." His hand came up, hesitated, then gently touched her face. "You've been right here, Helena, patient and quiet and invisible. And I never saw you. I never tried." Her throat tightened. "Luca, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for another chance." His thumb brushed her cheekbone and Helena's breath caught. "I'm just saying that if we're going to burn down the people who hurt you, I want to be the one holding the match." Helena had spent 5 years wanting Luca to see her, to acknowledge her, to treat her like she mattered. And now that he finally was, she didn't know what to do with it, so she did the only thing that made sense. She nodded. "Okay," she said, "let's burn it all down." Luca's hand dropped, but his gaze held hers for another heartbeat. Then he turned back to business, and the moment passed. But something had shifted, something that couldn't be unshifted. They spent the next hour planning, refining their strategy. Luca would maintain the appearance of considering Vivian's proposal while secretly preparing for the confrontation. Helena would stay visible, play the defeated wife, give no indication she knew anything. They'd use the week to gather final evidence, secure testimony from Dr. Reeves, and position their allies. "The meeting is Friday night," Luca said, "at the Ravello estate in Connecticut. Neutral ground, witnesses from multiple families. Perfect stage." "Will they let me attend?" "They won't expect you to. Vivian will assume you're too broken to show your face." Helena smiled, sharp and cold. "Then I definitely should be there. It could be dangerous. If the Ravellos realize what we're doing before we can expose them, I'm not afraid of them." And she wasn't. Fear had kept her trapped for too long. Now she had something stronger, fury. Luca studied her, and something like pride crossed his face. "You've changed." "No," Helena said. "I just stopped pretending to be what everyone wanted me to be." Before Luca could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression went carefully neutral. "It's Vivian," he said. Helena's pulse quickened. "Answer it." Luca put the phone on speaker. "Vivian. Luca." Her sister's voice was warm, confident. "I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to check in, see if you'd had time to think about our conversation." "I have." "And?" Anticipation hummed through the single word. "And I think we should discuss it further, in person." Luca's gaze locked with Helena's. "There are details to work through, logistics." "Of course." Vivian practically purred. "When were you thinking?" "I'm meeting with the Ravellos Friday night. Perhaps you could join us. If we're going to move forward with this, they should be part of the conversation." Silence. Helena could almost hear her sister calculating, wondering if this was genuine or a trap. But Vivian's ambition would outweigh her caution. It always did. "I'd be happy to attend," Vivian said finally. "Should I bring my attorney?" "That won't be necessary. This is just a preliminary discussion." "And Helena?" Luca's jaw tightened. "What about her?" "Will she be informed? Before Friday?" "Helena is recovering. I don't think she needs to be burdened with the details right now." "Of course. Poor thing." Vivian's false sympathy made Helena's hands curl into fists. "She's been through so much. It's probably for the best that she's not involved." "I'll send you the details," Luca said curtly. "Friday, 8 p.m. He hung up before Vivian could respond, and the silence that followed felt heavy with implication. "She bought it," Helena said. "She wants to believe it. That makes her easy to fool." Luca pocketed his phone. "Now we just need to make sure everything is in place before Friday. Starting with Dr. Reeves. I'll handle him. But there's something else we need to discuss." Luca moved closer, his expression serious. "Once we do this, there's no going back. Vivian will be destroyed. Your father will be exposed. The Ravellos will be humiliated. You'll make powerful enemies, Helena." "I already have powerful enemies. They just didn't know I was paying attention." "This is different. Right now they see you as collateral damage. After Friday, You'll be a threat. Your life will change. Helena thought about the 5 years she'd spent as a ghost in this house, the invisibility, the isolation, the quiet suffocation of a life that wasn't really living. Good, she said. I'm ready for it to change. Luca held her gaze, searching for doubt or fear. He wouldn't find any. Then we start now, he said, and we don't stop until it's finished. The next 4 days were a carefully orchestrated performance. Helena played her role perfectly. The defeated wife, recovering in seclusion, barely seen by staff or visitors. She took meals in her room, ignored calls from Vivian, maintained the appearance of someone too broken to care about anything beyond her own grief. But in private, she was building her case with the precision of a prosecutor. Angela Torres became a regular visitor, arriving through the service entrance, never announced, never logged. She brought more evidence, phone records showing calls between Vivian and Matteo Ravello, the family's heir apparent, text messages discussing timeline and contingencies, financial records showing Vivian had been receiving regular payments from the Ravellos for 3 years. She's been on their payroll longer than she's been planning your replacement, Angela said, spreading documents across Helena's bedroom floor. This wasn't just about stealing your husband. It was about giving the Ravellos inside access to the Moretti empire. Corporate espionage, Helena murmured. Treason is probably more accurate, in your world anyway. Angela pulled up another file on her tablet. And it gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. Your father knew. Not just about the medical sabotage, he knew Vivian was working with the Ravellos. Helena felt sick. He sold out both families? He sold out everyone. Vivian promised him a position in the new power structure once she married Luca. Chief political advisor, expanded influence, protection from some questionable financial dealings. Richard Ashford traded his daughter for a promotion. The betrayal shouldn't have surprised her anymore, but somehow this did. Her father had always been ambitious, calculating, cold, but she'd never imagined he'd sacrifice her so completely. I want him there Friday, Helena said quietly. I want him to see exactly what his ambition cost him. Angela smiled. I'll make sure he gets an invitation he can't refuse. On Tuesday, Dr. Marcus Reeves was brought to a warehouse Luca owned in Queens. Helena wasn't there for the initial conversation, but Luca gave her the summary afterward, in the study, both of them keeping their voices low. He broke in under an hour, Luca said. Doctors don't have the training for this kind of pressure. He confirmed everything, the payment from Vivian, the instructions to hide your diagnosis, the follow-up directives to ensure treatment never happened. Did he know why? He claims ignorance, says Vivian told him it was a family matter, that you'd agreed to it, that the money was to ensure discretion. Luca's expression was dark. He didn't ask questions because he didn't want to lose the payday. Where is he now? Safe house. Under guard. He'll testify Friday, or he'll find out what happens to people who hurt my wife. The possessiveness in Luca's voice sent a strange thrill through Helena. When had she become my wife instead of Helena or the marriage? Will he hold up under questioning? She asked. He'll hold up. I made sure he understands what's at stake. Luca moved to the window, the late afternoon light casting shadows across his face. The Ravellos arrive Friday at 8. The board members Vivian corrupted will be there too. They think they're coming for a negotiation about leadership transition. How many? 4 of them, all senior family members, all compromised by Vivian's promises. He turned to face her. It's going to be a full house, Helena. Everyone who matters will be watching when we expose her. Good. I want them all to see. Wednesday brought an unexpected complication. Helena was in her room reviewing evidence for the 100th time when her phone rang, her father's number. She stared at it, debating. Luca had said to maintain radio silence, avoid any interaction that might tip their hand, but curiosity and a deep burning need to hear what excuse Richard Ashford might offer made her answer. Helena. Her father's voice was careful, measured. I've been trying to reach you. I've been unavailable. So I gathered. Your sister is worried about you. Helena almost laughed. Is she? She mentioned you seemed upset at the hospital. She's concerned that perhaps you're not handling the recent disappointment well. Disappointment. He'd reduced 3 miscarriages to a disappointment. I'm handling it fine, Dad. Good, because I wanted to talk to you about something. A pause. Your marriage to Luca. It's become a topic of discussion in certain circles. What circles? Important ones. People are asking questions about viability, about succession, about whether perhaps it's time to consider alternative arrangements. Helena's grip on the phone tightened. He was already preparing his narrative, setting up his defense. Poor Helena, the failed wife. So tragic. But sometimes these things don't work out. Sometimes change is necessary. And what do you think, Dad? I think your happiness matters most. If this marriage has become untenable, if it's causing you pain, then perhaps we should discuss other options. Options like what? Like an amicable separation, a fresh start for everyone involved. Vivian has suggested that she might be able to help facilitate. I'm sure she has. Richard paused, and Helena could almost see him recalibrating. You sound angry. Do I? Helena, I know these past years have been difficult, but you have to understand that sometimes we have to make practical decisions for the good of everyone involved. The good of everyone, Helena repeated. Tell me, Dad, what's good for me in this practical decision? Security, freedom, the opportunity to find a life that actually makes you happy, instead of trying to fulfill an obligation that clearly isn't working. It was so smooth, so reasonable. Her father had always been good at making terrible things sound logical. And you'd support that? Helena asked. My divorce? If it's what you want, of course. You're my daughter. Your well-being is my priority. Liar, betrayer, conspirator. Helena took a breath, forcing her voice to stay level. I'll think about it. Good. That's all I ask. Relief colored his tone. We can discuss it more this week. Perhaps dinner? Actually, I have plans Friday night. Oh? What plans? Helena smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Family business. She hung up before he could respond and sat in the silence that followed, letting the rage settle into something cold and focused. Her father thought he was so clever, so untouchable. He thought he could manipulate her into compliance, make her disappear quietly while he collected his payoff. But Richard Ashford had forgotten something crucial. He'd raised 2 daughters. And while Vivian had learned his lessons about ambition and ruthlessness, Helena had learned something else. Patience, observation, the ability to survive in the shadows while everyone underestimated her. And now she was going to use those skills to take them all down. Thursday evening, Helena broke her self-imposed isolation to join Luca for dinner. Not in the formal dining room where they'd shared silent meals for years, but in the smaller breakfast room, intimate and quiet. The staff seemed surprised to see them together. Helena caught the looks, the whispered conversations that would spread through the house by morning. Good. Let them talk. Let everyone think the Morettis were finally acting like a married couple. Angela confirmed your father will attend tomorrow, Luca said, cutting into his steak. She sent him evidence of his financial dealings with certain offshore accounts, implied that unless he showed up, that evidence might find its way to federal investigators. Blackmail. Persuasion. Luca's lips quirked. There's a difference. Helena sipped her wine. And the board members? They'll be there. I told them we're discussing the future of the family, which is technically true. He set down his fork, regarding her seriously. Once this happens, things will move quickly. The Ravellos won't go quietly. There may be retaliation. Let them try. I'm serious, Helena. You'll need protection, security. You can't just go back to being invisible after this. I don't want to be invisible anymore. I know, but visibility comes with risk. Helena met his gaze across the table. You've lived with risk your entire life. Taught yourself to see threats everywhere. Trust no one. Always stay 3 steps ahead. It's exhausting, isn't it? Something flickered in Luca's expression. Yes. Well, now you don't have to do it alone. She set down her wine glass. We're in this together now. Partners. Isn't that what you said? I did. Then stop trying to protect me from consequences I've already accepted. Helena leaned forward. I know what I'm doing tomorrow. I know what it means. I'm not afraid. Luca studied her, and she saw the moment he truly understood that she'd changed, that the quiet, compliant wife he'd ignored for 5 years was gone, replaced by someone harder, sharper, more dangerous. Okay, he said finally. Partners. They finished dinner in companionable silence, and when Helena stood to leave, Luca caught her hand. Thank you, he said. For what? For not giving up. On this marriage. On yourself. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. I didn't deserve your patience, Helena, but I'm grateful for it. The words settled around her heart, warm and unexpected. For 5 years, she'd wanted exactly this. Luca seeing her, acknowledging her, choosing her. And now that she finally had it, she realized something important. She didn't need it anymore. She'd found her own strength, her own power, her own voice. Luca's recognition was nice, but it wasn't necessary. Still, she squeezed his hand before pulling away. We'll see if you still feel that way after tomorrow, she said, and left him sitting there, wondering what exactly he'd signed up for. Friday arrived with deceptive normalcy. Clear skies, crisp autumn air, the estate quiet and calm. Helena woke early, dressed carefully in a black suit that was elegant and severe. She styled her hair simply, applied minimal makeup. She wanted to look composed, controlled, powerful. Luca found her in front of her mirror, adjusting her collar. You look like you're going to war, he said from the doorway. Aren't I? He moved into the room, and she saw he was already dressed, dark suit, no tie yet, hair slightly damp from the shower. He looked dangerous and beautiful, and Helena let herself notice it for the first time without feeling like she was betraying herself. I have something for you, Luca said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Helena turned, eyebrows raised. A gift? A weapon. He opened the box to reveal a delicate necklace with a small pendant. It's a recording device, high quality, undetectable. Everything said tonight will be captured. In case we need backup evidence. In case we need to prove exactly what was said when people start lying about it later. He moved behind her, lifting the necklace. May I? Helena nodded, and Luca fastened it around her neck. His fingers were gentle against her skin, and she felt the warmth of him at her back, close enough that she could lean into him if she wanted. There, he said softly, his hands lingering on her shoulders. Perfect. Their eyes met in the mirror, and for a moment, neither of them moved. 5 years of distance, of careful separation, of refusing to acknowledge the attraction that had been there from the beginning. It would be so easy to turn around, to close the space between them, to let this become something else. But not yet. Not until they'd finished what they started. Helena stepped forward, breaking the contact. We should go. We have a few stops before Connecticut. Angela? And Dr. Reeves. I want to talk to him before he testifies. Luca nodded, and they left the estate together, side by side, partners in the truest sense. The warehouse in Queens was exactly as grim as Helena expected. Dr. Reeves sat in a folding chair guarded by 2 of Luca's men, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 4 days. When Helena walked in, he actually flinched. Mrs. Moretti, he stammered. I can explain. Don't! Helena crossed to stand in front of him, and the fear in his eyes was gratifying. You took money to sabotage my medical care, to let me lose 3 babies, to make me believe I was broken when you knew exactly how to help me. I didn't know what she was planning, I swear. She told me it was a family matter. You didn't ask because you didn't want to know. Helena crouched down, forcing him to meet her gaze. You're a doctor. You took an oath, and you violated it for $500,000. Reeves was crying now, pathetic and afraid. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could take it back. You can't. But you can tell the truth tonight. Every detail, every payment, every lie. Can you do that? He nodded frantically. Yes. Yes, whatever you want. Good. Helena stood. Because if you don't, if you hesitate or lie or try to minimize what you did, I'll make sure you lose more than your medical license. Do you understand? I understand. Helena turned to Luca. He's ready. They left Reeves to his fear and drove to meet Angela at a coffee shop in Manhattan. She had final documents, last-minute additions to their evidence. The Ravellos know something's up, Angela said, sliding a folder across the table. Their security has been increased, and Matteo's been making calls all morning. Nervous? Helena asked. Cautious, but they'll still come. Pride won't let them back out now. Angela pulled out a photo, slid it over. I also found this. Thought you'd want to see it. The photo showed Vivian and Matteo Ravello at some expensive restaurant, his hand on her thigh, her head thrown back in laughter. The timestamp was from 3 months ago. She's been sleeping with him, Helena said flatly, for over a year. So when she marries Luca, the Ravellos won't just have inside influence. They'll have a direct pipeline through Vivian. Angela's smile was sharp. Makes the betrayal so much more complete, doesn't it? Helena stared at the photo, at her sister's face, radiant with ambition and desire and complete lack of conscience. She'd always known Vivian was selfish, manipulative, cruel, but this level of calculation, sleeping with the enemy, trading sex for power, plotting to destroy her own sister's life, it was breathtaking in its awfulness. I want this shown tonight, Helena said. I want everyone to see exactly who they're dealing with. Already in the presentation, Angela gathered her materials. Everything's ready. All you have to do is show up and watch them destroy themselves. By 7:30, they were on the road to Connecticut. Luca drove and Helena sat beside him, watching the city give way to suburbs, then countryside. The Ravello estate was an hour north, isolated and heavily secured. Going there felt like walking into enemy territory, which, Helena supposed, it was. Second thoughts? Luca asked, glancing at her. None. It's not too late to change the plan. I could handle this without you. No. Helena's voice was firm. This is mine. I earned this. Luca nodded, and they drove the rest of the way in silence. The Ravello estate appeared through the trees at exactly 8 p.m. A massive stone mansion, all security gates and cameras and armed guards. They were expected. The gates opened smoothly, and they drove up the long driveway to where several other cars were already parked. Everyone's here, Luca murmured. Helena's heart was pounding, but her hands were steady as she checked her reflection one last time. She looked composed, powerful, ready. Let's go ruin some lives, she said. And together they walked into the war they'd been preparing for all week. The foyer of the Ravello estate was all marble and menace, the kind of old-world grandeur that spoke of generations of carefully cultivated power. Helena walked beside Luca, her heels clicking against polished stone, aware of every eye tracking their entrance. Security personnel lined the walls, their presence a reminder that this meeting existed in the space where business and violence intersected. Matteo Ravello emerged from a side room, all-practice charm and expensive tailoring. He was younger than Luca by perhaps 5 years, handsome in an obvious way, with slicked-back dark hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Helena had met him twice before at functions where pleasantries were exchanged and nothing real was ever said. Luca, Matteo said, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. And Mrs. Moretti, what a surprise. I wasn't expecting you. I wasn't expected, Helena said smoothly, shaking his hand, but I thought it was time I stopped hiding from difficult conversations. Something flickered across Matteo's face, confusion, maybe concern. He recovered quickly. Of course. We're all family here, in a manner of speaking. Please, everyone's gathering in the library. He led them through corridors lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, each one seeming to judge the corruption their descendants had perfected. The library was enormous, leather-bound books climbing to vaulted ceilings, a massive table dominating the center of the room. Around it sat the players in Vivian's conspiracy, though most of them didn't know they'd been cast in that role. 4 members of the Moretti board occupied one side of the table. Older men, all loyal to the family for decades, now compromised by promises Helena was about to expose. Across from them sat 2 Ravello lieutenants, flanking an empty chair clearly meant for Matteo. At the head of the table sat Carlo Ravello, Matteo's father, a man in his 70s with eyes like chips of ice and hands that had ordered more deaths than Helena could imagine. And standing near the window, perfectly positioned to seem casual yet central, was Vivian. Her sister wore red, bold, confident, the color of victory she expected to claim. She looked stunning, every inch the woman who'd spent her life learning to weaponize beauty and charm. When she saw Helena, genuine shock crossed her face before the mask slammed back into place. Helena, Vivian said, her voice carefully modulated. I didn't know you'd be joining us. Luca thought it was important I be here, Helena said, moving to stand beside her husband. given that apparently my marriage is the topic of discussion. Silence rippled through the room. Helena filed away for later. Please, Helena filed away for later. Please, everyone sit, Carlo said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. We have much to discuss. Luca guided Helena to a seat, positioning himself between her and the Ravellos. A strategic choice, protective without being obvious about it. Helena folded her hands on the table and waited. Before we begin, Luca said, I'm expecting 2 more guests. They should arrive shortly. Matteo frowned. We agreed on who would attend, and I decided to expand the invitation list. Luca's tone left no room for argument. This conversation involves more people than originally anticipated. The tension in the room notched higher. Vivian's fingers drummed against her wine glass, the first sign of nervousness Helena had ever seen from her sister. The library doors opened, and 2 men. The library doors opened, and 2 men entered. Luca's security, flanking Dr. Marcus Reeves. The doctor looked terrible, pale and shaking, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal searching for escape. When his gaze landed on Vivian, he actually stumbled. What is this? Carlo demanded. Who is this man? This, Luca said calmly, is Dr. Marcus Reeves. Until recently, he was my wife's physician. He has some interesting information to share about her medical history. Vivian stood abruptly, her chair scraping against hardwood. Luca, what are you doing? This is a private business discussion. Sit down, Vivian. The command in Luca's voice was absolute. Unless you'd prefer to leave before hearing what the doctor has to say? For a moment, Helena thought her sister might actually run, but pride and curiosity kept Vivian rooted in place. She sat, slowly, her expression carefully arranged into confusion. I don't understand what's happening, Vivian said. Why would Helena's doctor be relevant to a business meeting? That's what we're about to find out, Luca said. He nodded to Dr. Reeves. Tell them everything. The doctor swallowed hard, his hands trembling. I was Mrs. Moretti's fertility specialist 4 years ago. She came to me after her second miscarriage, looking for answers. We know this already, one of the board members said impatiently. The woman can't carry a child. That's why we're here, to discuss alternatives. She can carry a child, Reeves said, his voice gaining strength from desperation. She has hereditary thrombophilia. It's a blood clotting disorder that causes recurrent pregnancy loss. But it's completely treatable with proper monitoring and medication. Silence fell like a guillotine blade. Helena watched her sister's face, saw the moment Vivian understood that everything was about to unravel. But she kept her expression perfectly calibrated. Concern, confusion, just the right amount of sympathy. That's wonderful news, Vivian said carefully. If Helena can be treated, then surely... I never treated her, Reeves interrupted, and his voice cracked. I diagnosed the condition 4 years ago, and then I was paid $500,000 to bury that diagnosis and ensure Mrs. Moretti never received the treatment that would have saved her pregnancies. The room erupted. Board members stood, voices overlapping in shock and anger. Carlo Ravello's eyes narrowed dangerously. Matteo looked between Vivian and his father, clearly trying to assess damage control. And Vivian went very, very still. That's absurd, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Why would anyone do that? Who would pay for such a thing? Luca pulled out a tablet, brought up documents Helena knew by heart. You would. The payment to Dr. Reeves came from an offshore account registered to a shell company. That shell company is funded by the Ravello family and administered by you, Vivian. He turned the tablet so everyone could see. Bank records, wire transfers, account numbers that led inexorably to one conclusion. You're saying Vivian sabotaged her own sister's pregnancies? Carlo Ravello's voice was dangerously soft. That's quite an accusation, Luca. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. Luca brought up more documents, emails, text messages, phone records. For 3 years, Vivian has been in regular contact with your son, Matteo. They've been planning to dissolve my marriage to Helena and replace her with Vivian. In exchange, you would gain inside access to Moretti family operations. Matteo shot to his feet. That's a lie. Is it? Helena spoke for the first time since the revelations began, her voice calm and clear. Then explain this. She pulled out her phone, brought up the photo Angela had given her, Vivian and Matteo at dinner, intimate and conspiratorial. This was taken 3 months ago, but I have documentation of your relationship going back over a year. Hotel records, credit card statements, witnesses who can place you together at least twice a month. So they're having an affair, one of the board members said. That's hardly evidence of conspiracy. The affair is just context, Luca interrupted. The conspiracy is documented in 3 years of communication between Vivian and the Ravellos. They discuss timeline, strategy, how to make my marriage fail organically, how to position the board members against Helena, how to create enough doubt about succession that divorce would seem reasonable. He pulled up messages on the screen, displayed them for everyone to read. Vivian's words, clear and damning, discussing Helena like she was an obstacle to be removed rather than a person. You're twisting this, Vivian said, but her voice had lost its confidence. Those messages are out of context. Then provide context, Helena said. Explain why you paid my doctor to hide a treatable condition. Explain why you told Luca I was damaged and broken when you knew I could have been helped. Explain why you've been sleeping with our family's rivals while plotting to steal my husband. Vivian's mask finally cracked. The sympathy, the concern, the sisterly affection, all of it fell away, revealing the cold calculation underneath. You want context? Vivian's voice turned sharp, ugly. Fine. You were never supposed to be in this marriage, Helena. I was supposed to marry Luca. I was the one who negotiated with the families. I was the one who had the connections, the intelligence, the capability to be a real partner to someone like him. But Dad chose you because you were younger, prettier, more malleable. Vivian. Their father's name died on Helena's lips as the library doors opened again. Richard Ashford entered, flanked by more of Luca's security. He looked furious, defensive, already preparing his denials. But when he saw the assembled group, the documents displayed on screens, his daughter's unraveling composure, something in his expression shifted to fear. What is this? Richard demanded. I was told this was a family emergency. It is, Helena said. Our family's emergency, the one you helped create. She stood, moving to face the father who'd sold her out. You received $600,000 over 4 years, payments disguised as consulting fees and investment returns. The money came from the same accounts that paid Dr. Reeves. You knew what Vivian was doing. You were complicit in it. Richard's face went pale. That's not... I didn't know the details. You knew enough. Helena pulled up more evidence, laid it bare for everyone to see. You knew Vivian was working with the Ravellos. You knew she wanted to replace me, and you took money to make sure it happened. Your own daughter, Dad. You sabotaged my medical care, let me believe I was broken, helped destroy my marriage, all for money and political positioning. The board members were on their feet now, voices raised in anger. This wasn't just about a failed marriage anymore. This was about betrayal at the highest levels, about compromised loyalty, about enemies infiltrating their operations through manipulation and greed. Carlo Ravello remained seated, his expression carved from granite. Matteo, he said quietly, is this true? Matteo looked trapped, caught between confession and denial. Father, I can explain. Is it true? Carlo's voice could have frozen fire. Vivian approached me, Matteo said quickly. She offered access, information, an alliance through marriage to Luca. She said the Moretti marriage was already failing, that Helena couldn't produce an heir, that it was just a matter of time. We thought it was an opportunity. You thought you could manipulate the Moretti family through pillow talk and conspiracy. Carlo stood slowly, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. You compromised our family's integrity. You made us complicit in medical malpractice and sabotage. You made us look like amateurs who resort to harming women to gain advantage. Father, enough. Carlo turned to Luca, and Helena saw something she hadn't expected. Respect. I was not aware of my son's activities, or the extent of this woman's manipulations. The Ravello family does not condone such tactics. It was smoothly done, the disavowal. Carlo was cutting ties with the conspiracy, protecting his family's reputation by sacrificing the conspirators. Matteo paled, understanding he'd just been thrown to the wolves by his own father. What do you propose? Carlo asked Luca. That depends on what you knew and when you knew it. Luca's voice was steel. If this conspiracy went higher than Matteo, it did not. Carlo's answer was immediate, absolute. My son acted without authorization or knowledge. He will face consequences within our family, but the Ravello organization had no part in this betrayal. It was a lie, Helena knew. Carlo was too smart, too controlling to be completely unaware of his son's activities. But it was a convenient lie, one that allowed both families to save face while still destroying the conspirators. Then we have an understanding, Luca said. Your family was deceived, as mine was. The guilty parties will be held accountable. Agreed. Carlo moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Luca, your wife has more spine than we were led to believe. Perhaps you should have paid attention to that sooner. It was almost a compliment. Coming from Carlo Ravello, it might have been the highest praise Helena would ever receive. The Ravellos left, taking Matteo with them. Helena didn't envy him the conversation he was about to have with his father. In their world, failure was punished swiftly and severely, which left Vivian, Richard, and the 4 compromised board members staring at the evidence of their betrayal displayed on multiple screens. You can't prove any of this, Vivian tried, but her voice lacked conviction. Those documents could be fabricated. They're not, and you know it. Luca gestured to his security. Doctor, Reeves has already provided a full statement. We have financial forensics, communication records, witness testimony. We have everything we need to destroy you legally, socially, and professionally. So what do you want? Richard asked, his political instincts finally kicking in. Money? Silence? What's your price for making this go away? Luca laughed, cold and without humor. You think this is a negotiation? You sabotaged my wife. You conspired with my enemies. You corrupted my board and threatened my family's stability. There is no price that makes this go away. Then what? Vivian's composure finally shattered completely. You're going to kill us? Have us arrested? What? Neither, Helena said, and everyone turned to look at her. You're going to live with what you've done, in complete public disgrace. She pulled out her phone, brought up a prepared email. I'm sending all of this evidence to every major player in our world. The families, the board members, the political contacts, the social circles you both care so much about. By morning, everyone will know exactly what you did. You can't, Vivian's voice broke. Helena, please, I'm your sister. No, Helena said quietly. A sister doesn't sabotage your medical care. A sister doesn't steal your husband. A sister doesn't plot your destruction for years while pretending to care. You're just someone who happens to share my DNA. And that stops meaning anything after the 3rd betrayal. She hit send and watched her sister's face crumble as years of careful social positioning disintegrated in an instant. The board members who cooperated with Vivian are removed from their positions effective immediately, Luca said, addressing the 4 men who'd been promised power in exchange for disloyalty. You'll keep your titles for appearances, but you'll have no authority, no access, no future in this organization. I'm letting you live because you are pawns, not architects. Don't make me regret that mercy. The men filed out silently, their political careers over, their reputations destroyed. Richard tried one last gambit. I'm still Helena's father. That has to count for something. It counted for $600,000, Helena said. You've already collected your value from our relationship. Now you're going to take what's left of your reputation and disappear. Move somewhere quiet. Keep your head down and never contact me again. Helena, those are your options, Dad. Exile or exposure. Choose. Richard looked at his daughter, perhaps truly seeing her for the first time in years. The quiet, compliant girl had become someone who could destroy him with a single phone call. He chose survival. I'll be gone by Monday, he said quietly, and left without another word, which left only Vivian. Helena's sister stood alone in the center of the library, her red dress now looking garish instead of powerful, her carefully constructed life collapsing around her. Tears streaked her makeup, and for a moment Helena almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I want you to understand something, Helena said, crossing to stand in front of Vivian. You could have just talked to me. If you wanted Luca, if you thought you'd be better for him, you could have made your case. Instead, you destroyed 3 lives that were never born. You made me believe I was broken. You turned my own father against me. You conspired with enemies and nearly started a war between families, all because you wanted what I had without being honest enough to just ask for it. You wouldn't have given him up, Vivian whispered. You're right. I wouldn't have. Because this marriage was mine, for better or worse. And you don't get to steal people's lives just because you think you deserve them more. Helena pulled out one final document, divorce papers, already prepared. Luca could have these processed if he wanted. He could end our marriage tonight, be free to choose someone else, maybe even you, if he was stupid enough. She held up the papers, then deliberately tore them in half. But he's not going to, because we've decided that our marriage is worth fighting for, not because of obligation or alliance or what the families need, because we choose it. We choose each other. Helena moved back to Luca's side and he took her hand. The gesture was simple, possessive, undeniable. They were presenting a united front and everyone in the room understood what it meant. You're dismissed, Vivian, Luca said. Leave New York, leave the East Coast. Build whatever life you can somewhere else, with people who don't know what you did. But if you ever come near my wife again, if you ever attempt to contact her or interfere in our lives, I will make sure you regret surviving tonight. Vivian looked between them, her face a mask of devastation and rage. You think you've won? You think this is over? It is for you, Helena said simply. And it was. Vivian had nothing left. No reputation, no allies, no leverage, no future in the world she'd schemed to conquer. She was radioactive now, untouchable, a cautionary tale about ambition without conscience. She left the library without another word, and Helena heard the click of her heels fading into distance, taking with them the last remnants of their sisterhood. The library was empty now except for Helena, Luca, and his security team. The evidence still glowed on screens, documentation of betrayal and consequences. Helena felt drained, exhausted, but also strangely free. The weight she'd carried for 5 years, the shame, the failure, the invisibility, had finally lifted. It's done, Luca said quietly. Almost. Helena turned to face him. There's one more thing we need to discuss. What's that? Us. Helena took a breath. You said we choose each other, that our marriage is worth fighting for. Did you mean it? Luca stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. Every word. Because I need to know, Luca. I need to know if this is real or if you're just standing by me because it's politically convenient. Because I'm done being convenient. I'm done being an obligation. You were never an obligation, Luca said, and his voice carried a weight of truth that 5 years of silence had lacked. You were a choice I made badly. I chose to ignore you, to keep you at distance, to treat our marriage like a contract instead of a partnership. But I'm choosing differently now. Why? Because I proved useful? Because I helped you expose your enemies? Because you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for? Because you survived betrayal that would have destroyed most people? Because you chose to fight instead of disappear? His thumbs brushed away tears Helena hadn't realized she was crying. Because somewhere in the last week, I fell in love with my own wife. The words hit like lightning, illuminating everything they'd carefully avoided saying. Helena's breath caught, her heart hammering against her ribs. You love me, she repeated, testing the words. I do. Luca's smile was crooked, almost vulnerable. I know I don't deserve it. I know I've given you every reason to walk away. But if you're willing to give me a chance, a real chance, not the half-hearted attempt at marriage we've been surviving, I promise I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worth it. Helena looked at the man she'd married 5 years ago in a ceremony full of political strategy and empty promises. She'd known him as distant, cold, untouchable. She'd learned to expect nothing and received exactly that. But the man standing in front of her now was different, present, honest, willing to choose her when choice actually mattered. I don't love you, Helena said, and watched pain flash across Luca's face. Not yet. You're right. You don't deserve it. Not after 5 years of making me invisible. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. But I could love you, she continued, if you mean what you say. If this is really the beginning of something new instead of just words to get through a crisis. If you're willing to actually be my husband instead of just my legal obligation. I am, Luca said immediately. I will be, whatever it takes. Then prove it, Helena said. Not with grand gestures or expensive gifts. Prove it by showing up, by being present, by treating me like a partner instead of a problem to solve. Deal. Luca leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. We do this right, Helena. Starting now. No more separate bedrooms, no more careful distance, no more pretending we're strangers who happen to share a last name. A real marriage, Helena murmured. The realest one I've ever had. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching hers. Can I kiss you? A real kiss, not the performance we've done at functions? Helena had kissed Luca exactly 7 times in 5 years. 3 at their wedding, 4 at various public events where appearances mattered. Every single one had been chaste, brief, meaningless. This time, when she nodded, Luca kissed her like he meant it. His mouth was warm against hers, gentle but insistent, asking permission even as he took what she offered. Helena's hands came up to grip his jacket, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened into something that made her forget they were standing in enemy territory with security watching. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca's smile was genuine, possibly the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. We should go home, he said. We should, Helena agreed. We have a lot of lost time to make up for. They left the Ravello estate together, hand in hand, partners in every sense that mattered. The drive back to Westchester was quiet, but it was a comfortable silence instead of the hollow emptiness that had characterized their marriage for years. Helena's phone buzzed repeatedly. Responses to the evidence she'd sent, questions and demands and shock from people who'd never imagined quiet Helena Moretti could orchestrate such comprehensive revenge. She ignored all of it. Tomorrow would be soon enough to deal with the aftermath. Tonight was just for them. When they arrived home, the estate was dark and silent. Staff had been dismissed for the evening, giving them privacy Luca had clearly planned for. He led Helena inside, not to her isolated guest room or to the master suite they'd abandoned, but to a different wing of the house entirely. Where are we going? Helena asked. Somewhere new, Luca said. I had it prepared this week. While you were building your case, I was building us a fresh start. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom Helena had never seen. Newly renovated, beautifully decorated, nothing like the cold formality that characterized the rest of the house. It was warm, intimate, clearly designed for 2 people who actually wanted to share space. You did this? Helena asked, stepping inside. I wanted you to know I was serious. About us. About making this work. Luca pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. No more separate lives, Helena. We're in this together now. Helena leaned into him, letting herself feel safe for the first time in years. Together, she agreed. And when Luca kissed her again, when he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bed they would finally share, Helena knew that everything that had broken was finally beginning to heal. The betrayals weren't forgotten. The lost years couldn't be reclaimed. The damage Vivian and Richard had done would leave scars. But scars were just proof that you'd survived, that you'd fought and won and come out stronger on the other side. And as Luca made love to his wife for the first time in their marriage, really made love with presence and passion and promises whispered against skin, Helena understood that sometimes the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was building something beautiful from the ashes of what tried to destroy you. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar windows, and for a disorienting moment, Helena didn't know where she was. Then she felt the weight of Luca's arm across her waist, the warmth of his body against her back, and memory flooded in. Not just of last night, but of everything that had led to it. She was in their new bedroom, in their new beginning, with a husband who'd finally chosen to see her. Luca stirred behind her, his hand tightening possessively before he seemed to wake fully. Helena, he murmured against her shoulder. You're still here. Where else would I be? I thought maybe I dreamed it, all of it. He pressed a kiss to her bare skin. The confrontation, the evidence, you tearing up divorce papers, this. Helena turned in his arms, studying his face in the morning light. He looked younger somehow, less guarded. The man who'd walked through life with armor bolted in place had let some of it fall away, at least here, in this moment. It was real, she said, all of it. Good. He pulled her closer, and they lay tangled together for a few more minutes, neither wanting to break the fragile peace they'd found. But reality was already pressing in. Helena's phone had been buzzing intermittently since dawn, and she could hear movement in the house below as staff arrived for the day. "We should get up," Luca said reluctantly. "Today's going to be complicated." He wasn't wrong. The evidence Helena had sent the night before would have reached every major player in their world by now. There would be questions, demands for clarification, families wanting to understand exactly what had happened and what it meant for existing alliances. Helena showered and dressed in her own room, force of habit, and because her clothes were still there. When she emerged, Luca was in the hallway, already on his phone, conducting damage control in 3 languages. He caught her eye and mouthed "coffee" while gesturing downstairs. The kitchen was normally staff territory, but Helena found it empty except for a pot of fresh coffee and a note from the housekeeper saying she'd given everyone the morning off. Luca's doing, probably, giving them space to navigate the aftermath privately. She was pouring her second cup when Angela Torres appeared at the back door, looking disgustingly pleased with herself. "I let myself in," Angela said, settling at the kitchen table uninvited. "Hope you don't mind. I wanted to see the carnage firsthand." "It's early for gloating," Helena said, but she was smiling. "It's never too early for gloating when the gloating is this well-deserved." Angela pulled out her tablet, brought up news feeds and social media. "Your sister's name is trending, and not in a good way." Helena sat beside her, scanning the headlines. Vivian Ashford's fall from grace was spectacular and public. Someone had leaked details to gossip sites and legitimate news outlets simultaneously. Within hours, the story had gone from whispered scandal to front-page news. Socialite implicated in medical malpractice scheme. Political consultant's daughter accused of sabotaging sister's pregnancies. Conspiracy rocks New York's elite families. The articles were carefully worded to avoid libel, but the implications were clear. Vivian had been exposed, and the court of public opinion was not being kind. "Your father's in there too," Angela noted, swiping to another article. "His political consulting firm lost 3 major clients overnight. Word is he's already put his Manhattan apartment on the market." Helena felt a pang. Not of sympathy, exactly, but of something complicated and sad. Her father had made his choices. Now he was living with them. Still, it was strange to watch your family disintegrate in real time, even when that family had betrayed you. "The Ravellos are keeping quiet," Angela continued. "Carlo's playing it smart, letting everyone know Matteo acted without authorization, that the family had no knowledge of the conspiracy. He's already distanced himself publicly. And Matteo?" Angela's smile turned sharp. "Hasn't been seen since last night. Rumor is Carlo shipped him to one of their operations overseas. Exile masquerading as a business assignment. So everyone was paying a price, some higher than others, but the consequences were spreading exactly as Helena had intended. She should have felt satisfied, vindicated. She'd wanted justice, exposure, for her enemies to face the truth of what they'd done. Instead, she just felt tired. Luca appeared in the doorway, still on his phone, but he paused when he saw Angela. "Ms. Torres, I should have known you'd show up to collect your victory." "I helped earn it," Angela said unapologetically. "I figure that buys me breakfast at minimum." "It buys you considerably more than breakfast," Luca said, ending his call. "Your forensic work was invaluable. Name your price." Angela studied him for a long moment. "I want my reputation back. Richard Ashford destroyed my career 4 years ago for asking questions. I want it known that I was right to ask them. I want my professional credibility restored." "Done." Luca's response was immediate. "I'll make calls today. By the end of the week, every firm in the city will know you're under Moretti protection and that your work is beyond reproach." "That's all I wanted." Angela stood, gathered her things. "Well, that and to watch Vivian Ashford's empire crumble, which I did. So I'll consider us even." She left through the same back door she'd entered, and Helena wondered if she'd ever see the woman again. Probably not. Angela had gotten her revenge and her vindication. She had no reason to stay connected to the chaos she'd helped unleash. "The board wants a meeting," Luca said, pouring himself coffee. "This afternoon. They want to understand what happened and what it means for family stability." "Are you going to tell them everything?" "I'm going to tell them enough. that Vivian conspired with the Ravellos to undermine our marriage, that several board members were compromised, that the threat has been neutralized, and our position is stronger than ever. He sat across from her. What I won't tell them is that my wife orchestrated the entire exposure. Better if they think I handled it. Helena bristled slightly. Why? I did the work. I built the case. I know, and I'll make sure you get credit where it matters. But in our world, if the families know you're this capable, this strategic, they'll see you as a threat instead of an asset. Luca reached across the table, took her hand. Let them underestimate you, Helena. It's more valuable than recognition. She wanted to argue, to demand acknowledgement for what she had accomplished. But Luca was right. Being underestimated had been her greatest advantage throughout this entire ordeal. People had dismissed her, overlooked her, never imagined quiet Helena could be dangerous. Why give that up now? Fine, she said. But you and I both know the truth. That matters more anyway. It does. Luca's thumb traced circles on her palm. Speaking of truth, we need to discuss your medical treatment. I've already contacted a new specialist, Dr. Sarah Chen, highly recommended. No connection to anyone who could compromise her integrity. She wants to see you this week. Helena's breath caught. The thrombophilia. The condition that had been deliberately hidden that had cost her 3 pregnancies. With proper treatment, she could try again, could actually have a chance at the family she'd spent 5 years failing to create. Are you sure? She asked. I mean, after everything that's happened, do you still want... Yes? Luca's answer was absolute. If you want to try again, if you want to have a family, then we'll do it right this time. With proper medical care. With me actually present and supportive. With both of us choosing it, instead of just going through motions because it's expected. And if I'm not ready, if I need time to just be us before we add the pressure of pregnancy, then we take time. There's no deadline, Helena, no board requirement that matters more than what we want. He squeezed her hand. This marriage is ours now. We make the rules. It was such a simple statement, but it represented a fundamental shift. For 5 years, their marriage had been defined by external expectations, what the families needed, what the board wanted, what tradition demanded. Now, Luca was saying they could choose differently, could build something based on what they actually wanted instead of what they were supposed to want. I'd like to meet Dr. Chen, Helena said carefully. Not because I'm ready to try again immediately, but because I want to understand my options, what proper treatment looks like, what's actually possible. I'll set it up. Luca stood, pulled her up with him, wrapped his arms around her waist. We're going to do this right, Helena. All of it. The marriage, the medical care, the future we build. I promise you. Helena leaned into him, letting herself believe it. Letting herself hope that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare of the past 5 years could transform into something worth having. The board meeting that afternoon was exactly as tedious as Helena had anticipated. She wasn't present. Luca had suggested she skip it, and she'd agreed, having no desire to sit through hours of men discussing her fertility like it was a quarterly earnings report. Instead, she spent the afternoon in the library, reading medical journals about hereditary thrombophilia, educating herself on the condition that had defined her life without her knowledge. The information was simultaneously encouraging and enraging. With proper anticoagulation therapy, most women with her condition could carry healthy pregnancies to term. The treatment was straightforward. Daily injections of blood thinners, regular monitoring, careful management. That's it. That's all it would have taken to save her 3 lost pregnancies, and Vivian had made sure she never knew. Helena closed the medical journal, pressing her palms against her eyes. She'd exposed her sister, destroyed her reputation, exiled her from their world. Justice had been served. So why did the rage still burn so hot? Because some betrayals were too big for revenge to fully satisfy. Some wounds went too deep for exposure to heal. You're thinking about her. Luca's voice came from the doorway. Helena looked up to find him leaning against the frame, tie loosened, looking exhausted from whatever political maneuvering the board meeting had required. How can you tell? You get this look, like you're deciding whether murder might still be an option. He crossed to where she sat, pulled up a chair beside her. The board is satisfied, by the way. I told them the Ravello situation has been resolved, that the compromised members have been removed, that our marriage is stable. Stable, Helena tested the word. Is that what we are? We're whatever we decide to be. Luca picked up the medical journal she'd been reading, scanned the pages. Learning about your condition? Trying to understand what was stolen from me. What could have been different if someone had just told me the truth? She took the journal back, closed it firmly. I keep thinking about the third miscarriage, the one that just happened. If I'd known about the thrombophilia 2 years ago, that baby might have survived. You can't think like that. It'll destroy you. How do you not think like that? How do you just move forward when the what-ifs are so crushing? Luca was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight of old pain. My mother had 6 pregnancies. I was the only one who survived. The others were lost to various complications, some early, some late enough that they had names and funeral plots. Helena stared at him. In 5 years of marriage, he'd never mentioned this. She blamed herself, Luca continued, spent years wondering what she'd done wrong, what she could have done differently. It ate her alive from the inside, that guilt and grief. She died when I was 14, and I've always believed it was partially because she never forgave herself for the children she couldn't save. Luca, I'm so sorry. The point is, I watched what that kind of thinking does to someone. How it poisons everything, turns every joy into a reminder of loss. And I won't let it happen to you. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. What Vivian did was monstrous. What you lost was real, and it matters. But you can't let it consume you, Helena. You can't let her win by destroying you from the inside, even after she's gone. Helena felt tears burning. How do I just let it go? You don't let it go. You carry it. But you don't let it be the only thing you carry. His thumbs wiped away tears that had started falling. You also carry hope, possibility, the knowledge that the future can be different than the past. That sounds like something a therapist would say. I've had several. Luca's smile was crooked. Turns out growing up in organized crime and watching your mother slowly die creates some issues. Who knew? Helena laughed despite herself, and the sound felt good. Cleansing. We're a mess, aren't we? Completely. But we're a mess together. That's got to count for something. They sat in the library as afternoon faded to evening, talking about things they'd never discussed in 5 years of marriage. Luca's childhood, Helena's relationship with her mother before she died, the ways they'd both learned to survive in a world that valued power over people. It was the kind of conversation that should have happened years ago, when they first married, when getting to know each other might have saved them both a lot of pain. But maybe they hadn't been ready then. Maybe they'd both needed to break before they could build something real. The appointment with Dr. Sarah Chen was scheduled for Thursday morning. Helena went alone, despite Luca's offer to accompany her. Some things she needed to do herself, needed to hear without filtering through someone else's presence. Dr. Chen was in her 40s, efficient and warm in equal measure, with an office that managed to feel clinical without being cold, a violation of medical ethics and basic human decency. You deserved proper care, and you didn't get it. The acknowledgement, simple and direct, hit harder than Helena expected. Thank you. Now let's talk about moving forward. Dr. Chen pulled up test results on her computer. I ran a full panel based on your history. The hereditary thrombophilia is confirmed. You have factor V Leiden mutation, which significantly increases clotting risk during pregnancy. But it's treatable. Completely. With proper anticoagulation therapy and monitoring, your risk of miscarriage drops to near normal levels. I've treated dozens of women with your condition. Most go on to have healthy pregnancies. Helena felt something unclench in her chest. So I could actually have a baby? Yes. With the right protocol, daily heparin injections, frequent ultrasounds, careful management of any complications, there's no medical reason you couldn't carry to term. Dr. Chen paused. But I want to be clear about something. Just because you can doesn't mean you have to. After what you've been through, if you decide you don't want to try again, that's completely valid. Everyone keeps saying that, like they're giving me permission to opt out. Because it's your body, your choice, not your husband's, not your family's, not society's expectations. Dr. Chen leaned forward. I've seen too many women destroy themselves trying to have babies they're not sure they even want, just because they think they're supposed to. So I'm asking you directly, Helena, do you want to try again? Or are you doing this because you think it's expected? Helena sat with the question, really sat with it. Did she want a child? Or did she just want to prove she could have one, to reclaim what Vivian had stolen, to fulfill the role everyone said she'd failed at? I don't know, she admitted. A month ago, I would have said yes immediately, but that was when I thought my worth depended on it. Now, I'm not sure what I want beyond just being seen as more than a womb with legs. Dr. Chen smiled. That's the most honest answer I've heard in a long time. And it tells me you're not ready to try again yet. Which is fine. This isn't a decision that has to be made today, or next week, or even next year. My husband is expecting, your husband can wait until you're ready, and if he can't, he's not worth having a baby with anyway. Dr. Chen closed her laptop. Here's what I suggest. We start you on low-dose anticoagulation as a preventative measure. You come in quarterly for monitoring, and we revisit the pregnancy conversation when and if you decide you want to. No pressure, no timeline, no expectations beyond taking care of your health. It was exactly what Helena needed to hear. Permission to not have all the answers, space to figure out what she actually wanted instead of what everyone expected. Okay, Helena said. Let's do that. She left Dr. Chen's office feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The path forward wasn't clear, but at least now she had options. She had control over her own body and medical care. She had time to decide what kind of future she wanted, instead of just accepting the one everyone else had scripted for her. Luca was waiting in the car, and from his expression, he was prepared to hear whatever she needed to say. I'm not ready, Helena said as soon as she was seated, to try for a baby. I need time to just be us, to figure out what I want beyond fulfilling everyone's expectations. She waited for disappointment, for pressure, for the subtle guilt trip about family obligations. Instead, Luca just nodded. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What else would I say? You're not ready, so we wait. It's not complicated, Helena. The board can wait too, or they can find something else to worry about besides our reproductive schedule. He reached over, laced his fingers through hers. I meant what I said. This marriage is ours. We decide what happens and when. Nobody else gets a vote. Helena squeezed his hand, feeling tears prick her eyes again. When had she become such a crier? 5 years of holding everything in, and now the floodgates were permanently open. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For actually hearing me. For not making this about what you want or what the family needs. For just letting me be uncertain without trying to fix it. Luca lifted their joined hands, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. I've spent 5 years not hearing you. I'm done with that. Whatever you need, whatever you want, whatever pace you need to move at, I'm here. No pressure, no expectations. Just us figuring it out together. They drove back to Westchester in comfortable silence, and Helena felt something settle in her chest. Not everything was resolved. She still carried rage about what Vivian had done, grief about what she'd lost, uncertainty about what came next. But for the first time in 5 years, she wasn't carrying it alone. The weeks that followed developed a rhythm that felt almost normal. Luca restructured his schedule to actually be home most evenings. They had dinner together, real conversations, shared their days like actual married couples did. He stopped treating the house like a hotel and started treating it like a home. Helena began reclaiming spaces she'd abandoned. She redecorated the library, turned one of the unused guest rooms into a studio where she could paint. Something she'd loved before marriage swallowed her identity. She hired her own assistant, started managing her own schedule instead of just appearing where she was told. The board meetings continued, but Helena noticed a subtle shift. Luca consulted her now, asked her opinion on decisions, treated her like the partner she was instead of like expensive furniture. Some of the older board members looked uncomfortable with her increased visibility, but none of them were stupid enough to complain. Not after what had happened to the last people who'd underestimated her. Vivian's exile was absolute. Helena heard through social channels that her sister had moved to California, was trying to reinvent herself in tech circles that didn't know her history. It wouldn't work. The internet never forgot. And Vivian's scandal had been too public, too juicy to fade quietly. But at least she was gone, no longer a presence Helena had to navigate around. Richard Ashford had been more difficult to track. He'd sold his New York properties, closed his consulting firm, and apparently moved somewhere in the Southwest. New Mexico, maybe, or Arizona. Somewhere he could disappear into retirement and away from the wreckage of his reputation. Helena tried not to think about him, tried not to wonder if he felt any remorse for what he'd done. Probably not. Men like her father rarely did. It was 6 weeks after the confrontation when Helena's period was late. She noticed it almost absently. She'd been so irregular for years that a late cycle barely registered. But when it stretched to 2 weeks, then 3, she started paying attention. She was in the bathroom, staring at a pregnancy test she'd bought on impulse during a pharmacy run, when Luca knocked on the door. "Helena, you okay in there?" She opened the door, holding the unopened box. "I think I might be pregnant." Luca went very still. "You think?" "I'm 3 weeks late. I'm never 3 weeks late." She looked down at the box, at the promise and threat it represented. "I'm on blood thinners now, doctor. Chen said we should be using protection if we weren't trying, but we haven't been, and I didn't think—" "Helena, breathe." Luca took the box from her hands, guided her to sit on the edge of the bathtub. "Do you want to take the test?" "I don't know. Maybe? What if it's positive? Then we'll figure it out, together." "I'm not ready. We said we'd wait until I was ready. Plans change. Bodies don't follow schedules." Luca crouched in front of her, his hands on her knees. "If you're pregnant, we'll deal with it. Dr. Chen will adjust your treatment, we'll do whatever needs to be done medically, and emotionally, we'll take it one day at a time. And if I'm not ready to be a mother, then you'll learn, or you won't, and we'll figure out what that means. But none of that matters until we know for sure." He picked up the box, pulled out the test. "So let's find out." Helena took the test with shaking hands, and Luca waited outside the bathroom while she peed on a stick and tried not to spiral into panic. 3 minutes. The instructions said to wait 3 minutes for accurate results. It was the longest 3 minutes of her life. When the timer on her phone went off, Helena couldn't make herself look. She opened the bathroom door, held out the test to Luca without checking the result. "You look," she said. "I can't." Luca took the test, studied it for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, and Helena's heart hammered so hard she thought she might pass out. "It's positive," he said finally. "You're pregnant." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication and history and all the ways this had gone wrong before. Helena sat down abruptly on the bathroom floor, her back against the tub, trying to process what she was feeling. Fear, definitely. Panic, absolutely. But underneath that, something else. Something that might have been hope if she let herself acknowledge it. "Helena." Luca sat beside her on the floor, the pregnancy test still in his hand. "Talk to me. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking this is terrifying. I'm thinking about everything that went wrong before. I'm thinking about the blood clotting disorder and the medical protocol and all the ways this could fail." She took a shaky breath. "But I'm also thinking that maybe this time is different. Maybe this time I have a chance." "You do. We do." Luca set the test aside, pulled her against him. "Dr. Chen said with proper treatment, your odds are good. And this time you'll have that treatment. You'll have support. You'll have me, actually present instead of just going through motions." Helena leaned into him, letting herself be held. "I'm so scared." "Me too." The admission surprised her. "You are?" "Terrified. My mother lost 5 pregnancies, Helena. I know how badly this can go. I know what it does to people." His arms tightened around her. "But I also know we're not doing this alone or unprepared. We have the best medical care. We know about your condition. We can manage the risks. It's not a guarantee, but it's a chance." "A chance," Helena repeated. "I guess that's all anyone gets." They sat on the bathroom floor for a long time, holding each other, letting the reality settle. Helena was pregnant. After 3 losses, after years of believing it would never happen, after all the betrayal and sabotage and heartbreak, she was pregnant again. And this time, she had everything she'd been denied before. Proper medical care, a husband who was actually present, knowledge about her condition, support instead of isolation. It still might not be enough. Biology didn't care about fairness or second chances, but at least this time she had a fighting chance. "We should call Dr. Chen," Luca said eventually. "Let her know. Adjust your medication protocol. It's 8 p.m. She gave me her emergency number. for exactly this kind of situation. He kissed the top of Helena's head. This is important, Helena. We're not waiting until Monday to make sure you're getting the right treatment. The fact that he had Dr. Chen's emergency number, that he'd thought ahead enough to get it, that he was already prioritizing her medical care. It meant more than Helena could articulate. Dr. Chen answered on the second ring, and if she was annoyed at the evening call, her voice didn't show it. She asked precise questions about Helena's symptoms, her current medication dosage, when her last period had been. Then she scheduled an emergency appointment for first thing the next morning. We'll do a full workup, adjust your anticoagulation protocol, get a baseline ultrasound, Dr. Chen said. This is manageable, Helena. We caught it early, and you're already on preventative treatment. That's huge. After they hung up, Helena and Luca migrated to the bedroom, neither ready to sleep but both exhausted from the emotional roller coaster. They lay in bed, Helena curled against Luca's chest, his hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. We're having a baby, Helena whispered into the darkness. We're trying to, Luca corrected gently. One day at a time, remember? We don't get ahead of ourselves. We don't make assumptions. We just take each day as it comes. When did you become the voice of reason? Since I realized I had something worth being reasonable for. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Sleep, Helena. Tomorrow starts the hard part. But Helena couldn't sleep. She lay awake for hours, her hand joining Luca's on her stomach, trying to feel something that was too small to feel yet. A cluster of cells that might become a baby, might become a person, might become the family they'd spent 5 years failing to create, or might become another loss, another failure, another grief to carry. She tried not to think about that possibility, tried to focus on Dr. Chen's confidence, on Luca's support, on the fact that this time was different in all the ways that mattered. But fear was louder than hope, and the night stretched long and dark with all the ways this could go wrong. The appointment the next morning confirmed what the home test had shown. Helena was 6 weeks pregnant. Dr. Chen immediately adjusted her medication protocol, increasing her heparin dosage and scheduling weekly monitoring appointments. The first trimester is the most critical, Dr. Chen explained, pulling up charts and statistics on her computer. Your clotting risk is highest now, but with proper management, we should be able to maintain healthy blood flow to the pregnancy. Should be, not will be, should be. Helena focused on breathing, on staying present, on not catastrophizing about all the things that could still go wrong. Luca asked questions Helena's brain was too overwhelmed to formulate, about specific risks, warning signs to watch for, what they should do if complications arose. He took notes on his phone, and Helena realized he was building a protocol, a battle plan for keeping her and the pregnancy safe. The ultrasound showed a tiny flickering heartbeat, impossibly small and impossibly precious. Helena stared at the screen, at the grainy black and white image of something that might become her child, and felt tears streaming down her face. Strong heartbeat, Doctor, Chen said. That's a good sign. But it doesn't guarantee anything, Helena said, her voice hollow. No, it doesn't, but it's a start. Dr. Chen turned off the machine, helped Helena sit up. I know this is terrifying after what you've been through, but I need you to try to stay positive, reduce stress where you can, and trust the process. Fear isn't going to change outcomes, and it will make the journey harder. Easier said than done when every twinge, every symptom, every moment of her body felt like a potential warning sign. They left the doctor's office with prescriptions, appointment schedules, and a printed ultrasound photo that Luca tucked carefully into his wallet. In the car, Helena noticed his hands were shaking. You're scared too, she said. Out of my mind. He started the engine but didn't pull out of the parking space. I keep thinking about my mother, about how many times she went through this, how many times she hoped, and then lost everything. We're not your parents, Luca. I know. Logically, I know that. But trauma doesn't care about logic. He looked at her, and Helena saw the vulnerability he usually kept so carefully hidden. I can't lose you, Helena. If it comes down to choosing between you and the pregnancy, it won't. But if it does, then we'll deal with it when we have to. But we're not borrowing trouble from hypothetical disasters. Helena took his hand, squeezed it. One day at a time. Isn't that what you told me? Luca managed a smile. Using my own words against me. That's playing dirty. I learned from the best. They drove home, and without discussing it, both called off their other plans for the day. Luca canceled his meetings. Helena rescheduled her afternoon commitments. They spent the day together, mostly on the couch, not talking about the pregnancy but not avoiding it either. Just being present with each other, holding space for all the complicated emotions they were both navigating. That evening, Luca made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, but it was the first time Helena had ever seen him cook. They ate in the kitchen instead of the formal dining room, and it felt domestic and normal and precious in its simplicity. "We should tell the board eventually," Luca said over dessert. "They'll want to know." "Not yet." Helena's response was immediate. "I'm not telling anyone until I'm past the first trimester. Maybe not even then." "Helena, I'm serious, Luca. I can't handle everyone watching, waiting, expecting this pregnancy to produce the heir they all want. I need it to just be ours for a while. Private, protected." Luca studied her, then nodded. "Okay, we wait. It's your body, your pregnancy. You decide when we go public." The trust implicit in that agreement, the way he kept handing her control over decisions that affected both of them, it was still new enough to surprise her. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For letting me set the terms. For not making this about family expectations or board requirements. For just being on my side." "Helena." Luca reached across the table, took her hand. "I'm always on your side now. That's what partners means. You and me against whatever comes. Even if what comes is our own families and their expectations." It was a promise Helena hadn't known she needed until he gave it. And she chose to believe him, chose to trust that this time, finally, she wasn't navigating the impossible alone. The first trimester crawled by with agonizing slowness. Every morning, Helena woke expecting blood, expecting pain, expecting her body to betray her the way it had 3 times before. Every morning, Luca was there beside her, his hand finding hers before she was fully conscious, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone in this vigil. Dr. Chen's weekly appointments became the rhythm their lives revolved around. Ultrasounds, blood work, medication adjustments. Each appointment brought the same terrifying question: would the heartbeat still be there? And each time, miraculously, it was. A small flutter on the screen growing stronger week by week. 8 weeks, Dr. Chen announced at one appointment, pointing to measurements on the ultrasound. Everything looks exactly as it should. The heparin protocol is working. "But it worked before," Helena said, the fear she'd been carrying making her voice sharp. "For a while. And then it didn't." "Well, this time you're actually being treated for the condition causing the losses," Dr. Chen reminded her gently. "Before, your body was fighting an invisible battle with no support. Now we're managing the clotting risk proactively. It makes all the difference, Helena." Luca's hand tightened on Helena's shoulder. "How much difference? Statistically?" "With proper anticoagulation therapy for factor V Leiden, successful pregnancy rates are over 85%. Without treatment, it's closer to 40%. Dr. Chen met Helena's eyes. "You were trying to do something extraordinarily difficult without help. Now you have help." 85%. The number should have been reassuring, but Helena kept fixating on the 15% who still lost pregnancies despite doing everything right. Statistics meant nothing when you'd already been on the wrong side of the odds 3 times. Still, she made it to 10 weeks, then 12. Each milestone feeling both impossible and insufficient. The first trimester ended without disaster, and Dr. Chen finally smiled with something approaching confidence. "This is the dangerous period for you specifically," she said. "Most women with thrombophilia who miscarry do so in the first trimester. You've made it through. That's huge." "So it's safe?" Helena asked, desperately wanting someone to promise her certainty. "Safer, not safe. Pregnancy is never completely safe, and your condition means we stay vigilant throughout. But the odds are strongly in your favor now." Strongly in your favor still wasn't a guarantee, but it was more hope than Helena had allowed herself to feel in years. That night, she finally let Luca see her cry. Not from fear or grief, but from cautious, terrified relief. They lay in bed, his arms around her, her growing belly pressed against him, and she sobbed into his chest while he held her through it. "I'm so scared to hope," she whispered when she could finally speak. "What if I let myself believe this is real, and then it all falls apart?" "Then it falls apart and we survive it together," Luca said, his voice rough with his own unshed tears. But Helena, you can't live the next 6 months in terror of a disaster that might never come. At some point, you have to let yourself believe this could actually work. I don't know how. Then learn, one day at a time, 1 week at a time. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Today, right now, you're pregnant and everything is fine. Can you just be in this moment instead of catastrophizing about the future? Helena tried. She really did. But fear had become such a familiar companion that letting it go felt dangerous, like dropping her guard would invite disaster. At 16 weeks, they heard the heartbeat through a Doppler instead of just seeing it on ultrasound. The sound filled Dr. Chen's office, quick and strong and undeniably alive. Luca's hand crushed Helena's, and when she looked at him, there were tears streaming down his face. "That's our baby," he said, his voice breaking. "That's really our baby." And for the first time, Helena let herself believe it might be true. The second trimester brought different challenges. Helena's body started changing in ways that couldn't be hidden, her belly rounding, her clothes fitting differently, the pregnancy becoming visible to anyone paying attention. They'd kept the news private for 4 months, but they couldn't hide it much longer. "We need to tell the board," Luca said one morning at breakfast, his hand resting on Helena's expanding stomach in a gesture that had become automatic. "They're going to notice soon anyway, and it's better if they hear it from us." Helena knew he was right, but the thought of making her pregnancy public, of inviting all the scrutiny and expectation and pressure, it made her want to run and hide. "What if something goes wrong after we tell them?" she asked. "What if I have to announce a loss to everyone who's been waiting for this?" "Then we'll deal with it. But Helena, you're almost 20 weeks. You're past the point where most losses occur. You're being monitored constantly. Every test shows the baby is healthy and growing. At some point, you have to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop." "That's easy for you to say. Your body isn't the one that failed 3 times. Luca pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. "Your body didn't fail. It was sabotaged. There's a difference. And this time, with proper treatment, your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. Can you try to trust that?" Helena wanted to. She wanted to believe that this pregnancy was different, that the medical intervention was working, that she could actually carry a baby to term. But trauma had taught her that hope was dangerous, and 5 years of loss had rewired her brain to expect the worst. Still, she agreed to tell the board. They scheduled a meeting for the following week, and Helena spent the days leading up to it alternating between terror and resignation. The board would either be pleased or they'd find new ways to make her feel inadequate. Either way, her private struggle was about to become public property. The meeting took place in the formal conference room at the Moretti estate, all dark wood and leather chairs and portraits of stern ancestors judging from the walls. The board members filed in, 12 men, all older than Luca, all looking at Helena with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. She dressed carefully, choosing a fitted dress that showed her pregnancy clearly. No point in being subtle. If they were going to know, they might as well know completely. "Gentlemen," Luca said, standing at the head of the table with Helena beside him, "we've asked you here to share some important news. Helena and I are expecting a child. She's 5 months pregnant and all medical indicators are positive." The silence that followed was deafening. Then the room erupted in a chaos of congratulations, questions, and barely concealed relief. These men had spent 5 years watching the Moretti marriage fail to produce an heir. Of course, they were thrilled by the prospect of succession finally being secured. "This is wonderful news," Antonio Moretti, one of Luca's uncles, said from across the table. "After all these years, finally." The words stung despite their positive intent, finally, as if Helena had been deliberately withholding a pregnancy out of spite rather than fighting an invisible medical condition. "We're cautiously optimistic," Luca said, his hand finding Helena's under the table, squeezing in support. "Helena has a medical condition that caused previous pregnancy losses, but she's under excellent care now and everything is progressing well." "What kind of condition?" another board member asked. "Is it hereditary? Will the child be affected?" Helena felt her throat close. Of course, they'd immediately jump to concerns about the baby's viability, its potential usefulness to the family. Not about her health or well-being, just about whether the heir they'd been waiting for would be adequate. "It's a blood clotting disorder that affects pregnancy but not the child." Dr. Chen's voice came from the doorway. and Helena turned to see her doctor had arrived at Luca's invitation. Helena is being treated appropriately, and the condition won't impact the baby's health or development. Luca had arranged for Dr. Chen to attend, to answer medical questions so Helena wouldn't have to. It was a kindness she hadn't expected, and one she desperately needed. The rest of the meeting was a blur of medical explanations, timeline discussions, and plans for announcement strategies. The board wanted to go public immediately, to shore up family standing, to remind their rivals that the Moretti line would continue. Luca managed to negotiate a delay. They'd announce at 6 months, he said, when the pregnancy was far enough along that the risk was minimal. When the meeting finally ended and the board members filed out, Helena felt like she'd survived a battle. Dr. Chen squeezed her shoulder on the way out, and then it was just her and Luca in the empty conference room. "That was awful," Helena said. "It was necessary." Luca pulled her into his arms. "And now it's done. They know, they're satisfied, and we can focus on what actually matters. You and the baby staying healthy." "Did you hear them? After all these years, finally? Like I've been failing on purpose. They're old men who don't know what you've been through. Their opinions don't matter." He tilted her chin up, making her meet his eyes. "You know the truth, I know the truth. That's enough." It should have been enough, but Helena carried the board's judgment like stones in her pockets, weighing her down even as her belly grew. The pregnancy continued its steady progress through the second trimester. At 22 weeks, they learned they were having a girl. Helena cried in the ultrasound room, overwhelmed by the specificity of it. Not just a baby, but a daughter. Someone real and individual who would have her own personality and future in life. "A daughter," Luca whispered, staring at the screen. "We're having a daughter." He seemed awed by the revelation, and Helena wondered what he was imagining. What kind of father he would be, what kind of life he wanted to give this child, whether he was ready to love someone more than he loved power. They started preparing a nursery, though Helena refused to buy anything until she was past 30 weeks. Superstition mixed with trauma, the belief that preparing too early would jinx everything. Luca didn't push, just quietly had the room painted and ready so that when Helena was finally willing, they could fill it quickly. At 28 weeks, Helena felt the baby move for the first time. Not the gentle flutters she'd read about, but a solid kick that took her breath away. She grabbed Luca's hand, pressed it to her belly, and waited. When the baby kicked again, directly under his palm, his expression transformed into something Helena had never seen before. Pure, uncomplicated joy. "She's strong," he said, his voice full of wonder. "That was strong." "She's your daughter," Helena said. "Of course she's strong." The third trimester brought new anxieties. Helena's body was changing in ways that felt both miraculous and terrifying. She was huge, uncomfortable, constantly exhausted. Dr. Chen increased her monitoring to twice weekly, watching for any signs of clotting complications or premature labor. "You're doing beautifully," Dr. Chen said at 32 weeks. "The baby is healthy, your blood work is perfect, everything is exactly on track." "When do I stop being terrified?" Helena asked. "Probably never. Even after she's born, you'll find new things to worry about. That's parenthood." Dr. Chen smiled. "But maybe try to enjoy this part too. You're growing a human, Helena. That's pretty amazing." The Moretti family made the public announcement at 30 weeks, releasing a carefully worded statement about the upcoming addition to the family. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Gifts arriving daily, well wishes from allies, speculation from rivals about what this meant for family dynamics and power structures. Helena tried to ignore most of it, but some messages found their way through her defenses. One in particular, an email from an address she didn't recognize, time-stamped at 2 in the morning. "I heard about your pregnancy. Congratulations. I hope this one survives." It wasn't signed, but Helena knew Vivian's particular brand of poison. Her sister had been silent for months, exiled in California, apparently still seething with enough resentment to reach out from across the country. Helena showed the email to Luca, and something dangerous flashed across his face. "She's done," he said quietly. "I'll make sure of it." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm going to remind her exactly why continuing to harass you is a very bad idea." He pulled out his phone, made a call Helena wasn't supposed to hear. When he hung up, his expression was grim satisfaction. "She won't bother you again." Helena didn't ask what he'd done. In their world, some protections came with sharp edges, and she'd learned to accept that violence was sometimes the price of safety. True to Luca's word, there were no more messages from Vivian, no more contact from Richard. The people who'd betrayed her had finally understood that their access to Helena's life was permanently revoked. At 36 weeks, Dr. Chen cleared Helena to stop the daily heparin injections, transitioning her to a different protocol for labor and delivery. The end was approaching, the finish line finally visible after 9 months of holding her breath. "You've made it, Helena," Dr. Chen said. "Barring any unexpected complications, you're going to deliver a healthy baby in the next few weeks. You did it." Helena wanted to feel triumphant, but mostly she just felt exhausted and surreal. After 5 years of failure, after 3 losses, after believing her body would never successfully carry a pregnancy, she'd actually made it to term. "I'm scared of labor," she admitted, "of everything that could still go wrong." "Labor is unpredictable," Dr. Chen acknowledged. "But you'll be monitored constantly. We'll have specialists on standby, and we're prepared for any clotting complications. We've got you, Helena. You and your daughter are going to be fine." She wanted so desperately to believe it. The call came at 4 in the morning on a Tuesday in early spring. Helena woke to cramping that felt different from the Braxton Hicks contractions she'd been having for weeks. Sharper, more regular, insistent. "Luca," she said, shaking him awake, "I think it's time." He was alert immediately, the training of a life lived dangerously kicking in. "You're in labor?" "I think so." Another contraction hit and Helena gasped. "Yeah, definitely." The next hours were a blur of activity, the drive to the hospital, the admission process, the controlled chaos of preparation. "Doctor." Chen arrived looking surprisingly alert for the early hour, and suddenly Helena was in a delivery room with monitors beeping and nurses checking vitals, and Luca holding her hand like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "Remember your breathing," Dr. Chen coached. "Nice and steady. Everything looks good so far." But labor was long and brutal, and nothing like the sanitized versions Helena had seen in movies. Hours stretched into an eternity of pain and effort and terror that something would still go wrong, that she'd come this far only to lose everything at the last possible moment. "I can't do this," she gasped at hour 14, exhausted and shaking. "I can't." "You can," Luca said, his voice steady despite the fear she could see in his eyes. "You're the strongest person I know, Helena. You've survived everything else. You can survive this." "But what if something goes wrong? What if she's not okay?" "Then we'll deal with it. But right now she's fine. Her heartbeat is strong. You're doing everything right, and you're almost there." He pressed a kiss to her sweat-soaked forehead. "Just a little bit longer. Stay with me." Dr. Chen appeared at the foot of the bed. "Helena, it's time to push. The baby's crowning. A few more contractions and you're going to meet your daughter." The pushing phase was somehow worse than the waiting. More pain, more effort, more awareness of her body tearing itself apart to bring life into the world. But Luca stayed beside her, his presence an anchor, his voice a steady stream of encouragement she clung to when everything else felt impossible. "One more push," Dr. Chen said. "Come on, Helena. One more." Helena bore down with everything she had left, and suddenly there was release and a sound that stopped her heart, a thin, furious wail of a newborn taking her first breath. "She's here," Dr. Chen said, and placed a tiny, screaming, perfect baby on Helena's chest. "Your daughter is here." Helena stared at the infant in her arms, unable to process that this was real. After everything, after all the loss and grief, and believing it would never happen, she was holding her daughter, her living, breathing, crying daughter. "She's perfect," Luca whispered, his voice breaking. "Helena, she's perfect." The baby had dark hair like both of them, eyes scrunched against the brightness of the room, tiny fists waving in protest at being evicted from her warm cocoon. She was the most beautiful thing Helena had ever seen. "Hi, baby," Helena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi. I've been waiting so long to meet you." The baby quieted at her mother's voice, and Helena felt something slot into place in her chest. This was her daughter, her child. The life she'd fought so hard to protect had finally arrived, and she was real and healthy and here. Dr. Chen handled the medical necessities, cutting the cord, checking vitals, cleaning up the aftermath of delivery. The baby scored high on all her tests, breathing perfectly. No complications from the clotting disorder that had threatened her before she was even born. "She's absolutely fine," Dr. Chen said, returning the infant to Helena's arms after weighing and measuring. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, all fingers and toes present and accounted for. "Congratulations, you two. You made a beautiful, healthy baby." Helena couldn't stop staring at her daughter's face, cataloging every detail. The slope of her nose, the delicate arch of her eyebrows, the way her mouth pursed even in sleep. She was real. After 9 months of terror and hope tangled together, she was finally, undeniably real. "We need to name her," Luca said, his finger tracing gently down the baby's cheek. "We can't keep calling her the baby." They'd discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on anything, both too superstitious to commit until they knew for sure there would be a baby to name. Now the decision felt enormous and immediate. "Hope," Helena said suddenly. "I want to name her Hope." Luca looked at her questioningly. "Because of what we went through to get here? Because of what she represents? After everything that tried to destroy us, Vivian's sabotage, the losses, the betrayal, hope is what kept us going. Hope that things could be different. Hope that we could have this." Helena kissed her daughter's forehead. "She's proof that hope was worth holding on to." "Hope Moretti." Luca tested the name, then smiled. "It's perfect. She's perfect." They spent the next hour in a bubble, just the three of them, learning the shape of their new family. Hope nursed for the first time, latching on with surprising determination. Helena felt her body respond, milk coming in, her hormones shifting to accommodate this new reality of motherhood. "I can't believe she's really here," Helena whispered. "I keep waiting to wake up, for this to have been a dream." "It's real," Luca assured her, his arm around her shoulders as they watched their daughter sleep. "We made it, Helena. Against all odds, we actually made it." The hospital room filled with flowers as news of Hope's birth spread through the Moretti network. The board members sent congratulations, allies offered gifts, even some rivals sent neutral well wishes acknowledging the significance of the birth. Luca handled all of it, protecting Helena's recovery time, making sure she wasn't overwhelmed by the influx of attention. Dr. Chen came by on her evening rounds, checking Helena's incision from the episiotomy, monitoring for any clotting complications post-delivery. "Everything looks good," she said. "You're healing well. The baby is thriving. I'd say we can call this a complete success." "Thank you," Helena said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "For everything. For believing me, for treating the condition, for getting us here safely." "You did the hard part," Dr. Chen said. "I just provided the tools. You're the one who grew a human while managing a serious medical condition. Give yourself credit, Helena." It was strange to think about. For so long, Helena had seen her body as broken, inadequate, failing at its most basic function. But she'd grown a baby. Despite the thrombophilia, despite the sabotage, despite 3 previous losses, her body had successfully created and delivered a healthy child. Maybe she'd never been broken at all. Maybe she'd just needed the right support, the right treatment, the right partner standing beside her, instead of at a distance. They brought Hope home 3 days after her birth, and the estate that had felt like a mausoleum for 5 years suddenly felt like a home. Staff cooed over the baby, the board sent gifts that were actually thoughtful instead of obligatory, and Luca transformed into a father with surprising ease. Helena watched him with hope, the way he held her with such careful reverence, the way he changed diapers without complaint, the way he paced the hallways at 3 in the morning when she was fussy, murmuring in Italian about all the things he would teach her, all the ways he would protect her. "You're good at this," Helena said one night, finding him in the nursery with Hope asleep against his chest. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "What if I mess her up? What if I'm too much like my father, or not enough like him, or—" "You'll be exactly the father she needs because you're already choosing to be present. That's more than a lot of people get." Helena moved to stand beside him, looking down at their sleeping daughter. "We're going to make mistakes, Luca, but we'll make them together and we'll figure it out as we go." "Together," he echoed, the word carrying weight it hadn't held 5 years ago. "I like the sound of that." The first few months of Hope's life were an exhausting blur of feedings and diaper changes and sleepless nights. Helena's body healed slowly, and the clotting disorder required continued monitoring even post-pregnancy. But Dr. Chen remained vigilant, adjusting her medications, making sure the transition back to normal was managed carefully. "You did it," Dr. Chen said at Helena's 6-week postpartum checkup. "You successfully managed a high-risk pregnancy and delivered a healthy baby. How does it feel?" "Surreal," Helena admitted. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong." "That's trauma talking, but eventually you'll have to accept that things went right, that you won." Dr. Chen closed her chart. "You're cleared for normal activity, including intimacy when you're ready. But Helena, I'd recommend talking to someone about the emotional aftermath of what you've been through. Pregnancy after loss is traumatic, and you've carried that burden for years." Helena knew she was right. The fear hadn't magically disappeared with Hope's birth. She still woke up multiple times a night to check that the baby was breathing. She still panicked at every cry, every minor illness, every sign that something might be wrong. 5 years of trauma didn't heal in 6 weeks. But she had hope. She had Luca. She had proof that survival was possible, that joy could exist alongside grief, that futures could be different than pasts. It was a start. When Hope was 3 months old, Helena received an unexpected message. Angela Torres, the forensic accountant who'd helped expose Vivian's conspiracy, requesting to meet for coffee. They met at a quiet cafe in Manhattan, Hope sleeping peacefully in her carrier. Angela looked the same, sharp-eyed and purposeful, a woman who'd found her own vindication and was thriving because of it. "I heard you had the baby," Angela said. "Congratulations, she's beautiful." "Thank you. For everything, actually. We couldn't have done this without your help." "You'd have figured it out eventually. I just sped up the timeline." Angela sipped her coffee. "I wanted to let you know, your father died. Heart attack about a month ago. He was alone in Arizona." Helena absorbed the news with strange detachment. Her father was dead. The man who'd sold her out for money, who'd helped sabotage her pregnancies, who'd chosen ambition over his daughter, gone. She should feel something. Grief, relief, anger. But mostly she just felt empty. "I didn't know if anyone would have told you," Angela continued, "given that you'd cut contact, but I thought you deserved to know." "Thank you." Helena looked down at Hope, sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the complicated family history she'd been born into. Did he have anyone with him at the end?" "A few acquaintances, no one close. He'd burned most of his bridges." Angela's expression softened slightly. "For what it's worth, I don't think he died happy. Exile doesn't suit men who crave power." It was fitting, in a way. Richard Ashford had sacrificed his daughter for political positioning, and in the end, he'd lost both. He'd died alone and forgotten, his reputation destroyed, his ambitions unfulfilled. Helena tried to find satisfaction in that justice, but couldn't quite reach it. He'd been her father once, before betrayal redefined everything. That loss, not of who he'd become, but of who he might have been, still hurt in ways she couldn't fully articulate. "And Vivian?" Helena asked, because she might as well know. "Still in California, last I heard, trying to reinvent herself in tech, but the scandal follows her. She'll never have the life she wanted." Angela paused. "Does it help, knowing they both paid a price?" "I don't know," Helena said honestly. "It doesn't undo what they did. It doesn't give me back the time I lost or the pregnancies that failed. But maybe it closes the door on that chapter. Maybe now I can focus on moving forward instead of looking back." They talked for another hour, catching up on Angela's new forensic accounting firm, on the clients seeking her out specifically because of her reputation for finding hidden truths. She'd turned her own exile into opportunity, much like Helena had. When they parted ways, Angela looked at Hope one more time. "She's lucky, you know, to have a mother who fought so hard for her. Not every kid gets that." Helena carried those words home with her, turning them over in her mind. Hope didn't know yet what she'd survived to be born. The sabotage, the losses, the conspiracy. She didn't know about the grandmother and aunt who'd tried to prevent her existence, or about the parents who'd fought to make sure she had a chance at life. Someday Helena would tell her, when she was old enough to understand. But for now, Hope was just a baby, loved and protected, growing up in a family that had been rebuilt from ashes. That evening, Helena told Luca about Richard's death. He listened without interruption, then pulled her close. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "I don't know. Empty? Relieved? Sad for reasons I can't quite name?" Helena leaned into him. "He was my father. He was terrible, and he betrayed me, but he was still my father, and now he's just gone." You're allowed to grieve him," Luca said quietly, "even after what he did. Grief doesn't require the person to have been good. It just requires that they mattered to you once." Helena nodded against his chest, letting the tears come. She cried for the father she'd lost long before he died, the man she'd imagined he could be, the parent she'd deserved instead of the one she'd gotten. She cried for the years wasted on hoping he'd choose her, on believing family meant loyalty. And when the tears finally stopped, she felt lighter. Not healed, but lighter. Another weight she'd been carrying finally set down. Hope's first birthday arrived with the kind of celebration only Moretti wealth could produce. The estate was decorated with flowers and balloons, caterers filled tables with elaborate spreads, and family members from across the country descended to mark the occasion. Helena watched her daughter smash her first birthday cake with enthusiastic destruction, frosting covering her face and hands, delighted by the mess she was making. Hope was walking now, babbling constantly, developing a personality that was equal parts stubborn determination and infectious joy. She looked like both of them, Luca's dark coloring, Helena's delicate features, a combination that was entirely her own. And she was loved beyond measure, by parents who'd fought through hell to give her life, by a family that had waited years for her arrival. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Luca said, appearing at Helena's elbow with champagne. "Remember when we thought we'd never make it here? I remember thinking we were cursed, that I'd never successfully have a baby, that our marriage was doomed, that happiness wasn't meant for people like us." Helena took the champagne, clinked her glass against his. "I'm glad I was wrong. We were both wrong about a lot of things." Luca's arm slipped around her waist. "But we figured it out, and look what we built." Helena looked around the party, at Hope laughing with her cousins, at the board members who doubted her now celebrating her daughter, at the life she'd carved out of betrayal and loss and determination. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she married Luca 6 years ago. It was better, because it was real. Built on choice instead of obligation, on partnership instead of distance, on love that had grown from the ashes of everything that tried to destroy it. "I'm proud of us," Helena said, "of what we survived, of who we became." "Me too." Luca pressed a kiss to her temple. "So what do we do now? We've got the marriage working, the family secured, the enemies defeated. What's next?" Helena thought about it, watching Hope toddle toward them with frosting-covered hands and the biggest smile. "Now we just live. We raise our daughter, we build our life, we stop surviving and start actually thriving." "Sounds boring," Luca teased. "After the last 6 years? Boring sounds perfect." And it was. The months that followed were beautifully, gloriously normal. Hope grew and developed, hitting milestones that Helena documented with the enthusiasm of a mother who'd never taken life for granted. Luca continued running the family business, but carved out time for actual family, for dinner together, for weekends at home, for being present in ways he'd never managed before. Helena started a foundation, quietly, without fanfare, to help other women dealing with recurrent pregnancy loss. She funded research into thrombophilia and clotting disorders, created support groups for women navigating the emotional aftermath of miscarriage, and established a fund to help those who couldn't afford the specialized medical care that had saved her pregnancy. It was her way of taking the pain she'd endured and transforming it into something that could help others. Every woman who successfully carried a pregnancy because of her foundation's work felt like a small redemption for the years she'd lost. On Hope's second birthday, Helena was pregnant again. This time, the fear was manageable. Dr. Chen immediately started the heparin protocol. They knew what to watch for, and Helena had proof that her body could successfully carry a pregnancy to term. The second pregnancy was easier in every way except one. Hope was a toddler now, demanding and energetic, and Helena was chasing her while growing another human. But Luca stepped up, taking over more of the parenting duties, hiring additional help, making sure Helena could rest when she needed to. At 38 weeks, Helena delivered a son. He came faster than Hope had, born just 4 hours after labor started, screaming his arrival with impressive volume. They named him Marco, after Luca's mother, whose memory had haunted them both. 2 healthy children, Dr. Chen said, checking Marco's vitals. I'd say you've officially proven that your body isn't broken, Helena. And she had. 2 successful pregnancies, 2 healthy children, proof that with proper care and support, she could do what everyone had told her was impossible. The Moretti family finally had their heirs, a daughter and a son, both healthy and loved. The board was satisfied. The alliance was secured. All the external pressures that had defined Helena's early marriage had been met. But more importantly, Helena had herself back. The woman who'd spent 5 years disappearing had finally become visible, not because she'd produced children, but because she'd fought for her own truth, exposed her enemies, and refused to accept the narrative others wrote for her. She was Helena Moretti, and she was nobody's victim. Not anymore. On the night of Marco's birth, after the visitors had left and the baby was sleeping peacefully in the bassinet, Luca climbed into the hospital bed beside Helena despite the nurse's protests. We did it, he said, pulling her carefully against him. A family, a real one. We did. Helena rested her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. Thank you. For what? For finally seeing me, for choosing to stay, for becoming the partner I needed instead of just the husband I was stuck with. She looked up at him. I love you, Luca. I don't think I've ever actually said it. His breath caught. You love me? I do. Somewhere between the conspiracy and the pregnancy and the midnight diaper changes, I fell completely in love with you. Helena smiled. Took me long enough. You're worth the wait. Luca kissed her, gentle and reverent. I love you too, Helena. Have for a while now. Just wasn't sure you'd want to hear it. I want to hear it every day for the rest of our lives. And she did. They built a life together that was nothing like the contract marriage they'd started with. It was messy and complicated and beautiful, full of children's laughter and midnight feedings and arguments over parenting styles and making up in the hours when the kids were finally asleep. Helena never forgot what she'd survived to get here. The betrayal, the sabotage, the years of believing she was broken. Those scars remained, faint but permanent, a reminder of everything she'd endured. But scars were just proof that she'd healed, that she'd fought and won, that the people who tried to destroy her had failed completely. Vivian remained in exile, her reputation permanently destroyed, her ambitions permanently thwarted. Richard was dead and buried, his legacy one of betrayal and greed. The conspirators who had helped them had faded into obscurity or faced their own consequences. And Helena had everything they'd tried to take from her, a marriage that was real, children who were loved, a life that was hers by choice instead of by obligation. On Hope's 5th birthday, Helena stood in the garden watching her daughter chase butterflies while Marco toddled after her and Luca wrapped his arms around her from behind. Happy? He asked. Completely. Helena leaned back against him, letting herself feel the fullness of this moment. Are you? More than I ever imagined possible. His hand spread across her stomach, still flat, but not for long. Baby number 3 was due in 6 months, another carefully monitored pregnancy that Dr. Chen assured her would be just as successful as the previous 2. The Moretti family was thriving. The empire stood strong, and Helena had finally learned what true power looked like. It wasn't control or domination or forcing others to bend to your will. It was choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. It was fighting for truth when lies were more convenient. It was building something beautiful from the ruins of everything that tried to destroy you. Helena Moretti had survived her own family's betrayal, her husband's indifference, and her body's struggle against an invisible enemy. She'd exposed conspiracies, destroyed her enemies, and rebuilt a marriage from ashes. And in the end, she'd proven that the most powerful revenge wasn't destruction. It was thriving despite every attempt to make you disappear. It was loving fiercely in a world built on calculated indifference. It was choosing hope even when fear seemed more rational. She was no longer the ghost wife who haunted the Moretti mansion. She was Helena Moretti, mother, wife, survivor, fighter. And she'd finally found the happy ending she'd stopped believing was possible. The kind that came not from everything going right, but from refusing to give up when everything went wrong.